Chapter 522. No beastman knew how Duque had become so strong all of a sudden. As Duque's status rose, no one in the tribe could fight with Duque head-on and come back alive. And Orgrim's understanding of Duque was still at Stormwind City, when he attacked Stormwind's stronghold and fought with him directly. At that time, Duque gave Orgrim the feeling that if he had more time, he could still kill him. It was definitely not like now, where he felt an irresistible sense of powerlessness. Even after being weakened twice, Orgrim was still unable to withstand the full power of Duque's arcane spell. Countless times of superposition, the vibrating force instantly exploded on Orgrim's fist and spread throughout his body, making him feel as if he was going to be crushed into powder in the next moment. Although the battle-hardened Orgrim instinctively knew that he would not die from this attack and would at most be seriously injured, the feeling of not being able to take down a beansprout-like opponent like Duque made Orgrim feel like a hero at the end of his road. In that instant, he recognized that the one who stood in front for him was the Black Scar tribe's chief, Kashtrak. The second was the mixed-blood beastman hero, Lexa, whom the entire tribe had once despised and looked down on. As a mixed-blood beastman and ogre, he had a larger and sturdier body than beastmen. At the very last moment, the two heroes used their bodies to protect their great chieftain. So I'm so weak that I need someone else to protect me? Orgrim muttered to himself. This feeling was so desolate. Then, the excruciating pain that made the chief hover between life and death spread through him, and his vision went black. Chief! All the beastmen and chiefs exclaimed in shock. What was a leader? A leader was the backbone of a group, the soul and backbone of a group. No matter if it was because Orgrim had fought with Uther for so long and was only half injured, or because Duque had the upper hand in terms of technique, or because Duque had unleashed the Red Dragon Queen's aura to unleash such a shocking attack. In the eyes of both the Alliance and the Horde, it was Duque who killed Orgrim in one hit. Regardless of whether it was true or not, he would roar at it first. Orgrim is dead. The Alliance will win. Kill. Compared to the tribes whose morale first fell to the bottom, and then fell into the abyss, the Alliance's side was like an aphrodisiac first, and then on steroids. This was especially so for those unscientific paladins. In their peak condition, their radiance was even brighter than before. These guys actually broke through on the battlefield. He had broken through his own shackles. He had broken through the limits of his spirit and body. In terms of numbers and quality, the Horde still had the absolute advantage. However, in all directions, in the sky and on the ground, the Horde was being slaughtered by the Alliance like they were vegetables. And at this crucial moment, Orgrim lost consciousness. A snake could not do without its head. Because the chief was unconscious, Zuluhid, who happened to be the vice-commander, rode his dragon into the sky. The vice-chief of the Blackrock tribe, Sabek, was at the front lines. The weakness of the lack of a unified command was magnified. Kargath Blade Fist, who was more bloodthirsty and cruel, ordered them to fight it out with the Alliance. Kilrog Deadeye, who was more rational and resourceful, ordered a retreat. The two completely different orders created the greatest amount of chaos among the beastmen. If Orgrim and the others could break through the defensive line in front of the Iron Gate, then everything would be different. If Orgrim had not impulsively thrown out the Hammer of Destruction, perhaps the battle would still be in a stalemate. Unfortunately, there were no ifs. Long live Duke Marcus! They shouted. In every passageway, every pass, every gate, there were the silhouettes of the Alliance's warriors chasing after the Horde. Duque did not participate in this pursuit. Even though a Morning Star mage could continuously recover his mana, he was really exhausted. Ever since he had been ambushed by Ghoul Dan and activated the curse, he had not been able to sleep well for a single day. The shadow of death had always been lingering around his soul. It was only when Alexstrasza, who had recovered her strength, instantly removed the curse and stopped the rapid loss of his life force, that he could finally take a breather. It was not easy for him to make a huge comeback and take the greatest credit. The small credit should be given to the people below him. He could not just eat the meat while his brothers below him did not even get to drink the soup. After confirming the Alliance's victory, Duque's legs suddenly turned to jelly. Beside him, Sasha hurriedly supported Duque. Duque. Are you alright? I'm fine. I'm just a little exhausted after a full-powered attack. Completely subconsciously, Sasha let Duque's entire body lean against her without a care in the world. The approaching masculine aura caused Sasha to be a little confused, but her heart was filled with pride. The world in front of her seemed to be a little blurry. The scenes described in the legends and reality intertwined. At this moment it was as if she had returned to 2,800 years ago, when the humans and the high elves worked together to expel the trolls in a dreamlike war. That was a war between the two races against the fate of death. Back then, they had won everything. 2,800 years later, the new generation of elves and human heroes had once again returned to this battlefield, fighting for the sacred oath that had once again shone with glory. And today, the one leading all of this was the man leaning against her. A man who seemed weak but created miracles time and time again. A man who had protected her and saved her life. Sasha raised the longbow in her hands and shouted with all her might, "Long live Duque!" Unlike the relationship between Aurelia and Duque, Sasha did not have the entanglement of fate that the two of them had. If one had to use an adjective to describe her relationship with Duque, perhaps it could be summed up as fanatical worship. A natural fanatical feeling that had come from going through the trials of life and death. Facing Sasha, who suddenly turned around with a burning gaze and looked like she wanted to swallow him up, Duque was a little stunned. He then smiled bitterly, "I just feel like I've let Aurelia down." Sasha insisted, What's wrong with that? The high elves don't mind polygamy, nor do they mind polygamy. I don't believe that big sister won't be willing to share you with me. I said if, there's no if. If there's really an if, I'll snatch you from big sister even if I have to shed all pretense of cordiality. We're all women, so why can't we snatch a good man? It's not in my character to silently back out and then wish the other party happiness. With that, Sasha directly gave Duque mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Chapter 523. Duque lost his moral integrity. As an old driver from Mount Akina, he didn't have much moral integrity to begin with. If not for Mediva's humanity, perhaps Duque's moral integrity would have been even worse. Of course, moral integrity was something that could be picked up after it was dropped. Gavin Rad returned after a short chase. When he and Ronan heard that Marion was actually Neserio's spy, their mouths were wide open. Marion is a spy? Ronan was the first to not believe it. He was rather innocent, and didn't even dare to look at Marion's breasts, let alone find any traces of her. When did you find out? Gavin Rad touched the back of his head. Windsor wanted to know the answer to this question too. I noticed something was wrong from the very beginning. Duque suddenly sneered. Most of the people in the circle of high elven mages are arrogant and prideful. The Silvermoon Parliament used the reason that Kuel Salus made too many concessions to the humans during the Alliance back then, and tarnished Anastrian's reputation for 2,800 years. How could they suddenly show heartfelt respect for the newly established Rotterdam Alliance? Windsor was silent. It wasn't that Duque was wrong, but that Duque was right. The reason why the High Elves had the ancient name, Quell Dorii, was because of their unwillingness to be exiled, as well as their pride and self-satisfaction. Logically speaking, everyone knew that without the alliance, Kuel Salus would be destroyed at any moment. Knowing it was one thing, but accepting it emotionally was another. To be honest, Windsor knew very well that until now, not many of the High Elves regarded themselves as part of the alliance. Even though most of the people sent to participate in the war against the tribes this time were rangers who were considered to be of low status in the country. And the mages led by Marion were the only exception. Why would a powerful Radiant Moon mage, a Silvermoon Parliament member, deign to come and lick Duque's boots? Others couldn't figure it out. Only Duque himself knew that Marion might be one of Neserio's people. In the history of Azeroth that Duque was familiar with, there was no mention of Marion Firewing. Throughout history, there were not many members of the Silvermoon Parliament. To Duque, the members of the Silvermoon Council were a group of passers-by who were considered powerful at this point in time. The problem was that a powerful radiant moon wizard had suddenly appeared in this group of passers-by and directly participated in the process of saving the Red Dragon Queen. Duque immediately raised his guard against Marion. If there were any variables that would affect the course of history, the biggest variable would naturally be Duque himself, followed by Marion. As a high and mighty Silver Moon counselor, it could be said that he had been cheated by his teammates in the Alliance's war. However, a senator who had been loitering in various salons for thousands of years, making a living out of art and music, and who prided herself on being extraordinary and noble, risked her life to follow a cursed and dying Alliance deputy commander to play an adventure of infiltrating the enemy's rear. If Duke still couldn't figure out which side she was on, then Duke must be out of his mind. Therefore, after Duque was killed by Deathwing, Duque refused to resurrect immediately. He was waiting for Marion to jump out herself. Sure enough, she came. In his calculations, Duque didn't expect Sasha to rush in. Fortunately, Marion, like Necros, was overly reliant on the power of Demon's soul, which was why she was knocked out with a brick. During the subsequent body search, Duque also accidentally found something, another piece of Neserio's scale. It also had the effect of brainwashing. After pondering for a while, Duque decided to promise Alexstrasza to hand over this bad elf who tried to control her and humiliate her again to the Red Dragon army. Hee. I promise I won't kill her, Her Majesty the Queen said. Marion, you're on your own. Duque couldn't imagine how the Red Dragon Queen, who had suffered so much, would vent her anger on Marion. Now, Duque had two scales with Deathwing's soul in his hands. Looking at the remaining 1/5 of the platinum disc that had lost its demonic aura, Duque smiled evilly. Duque, why do I feel like you're a little naughty? Sasha muttered. No, I'm suddenly thinking about how Ghoul Dan will die after activating my death curse. He'll die? This time, everyone was shocked. One had to know that Ghoul Dan was a horde powerhouse who had fought 100 rounds with Antonidas to a draw. If not for his betrayal, the outcome of the Lordaeron battle might have been rewritten. Now, Duque suddenly said that Ghoul Dan would die? Normal people can't do anything to Ghoul Dan. To be honest, even if two Breaking Dawn wizards of the Alliance worked together, they might not be able to kill him. Duque smiled mysteriously. Then how can Ghoul Dan die? Ronan asked. Ha ha ha. Duque couldn't stop laughing. Of course, mortals can't kill a demigod warlock like Ghoul Dan. But Ghoul Dan's mistake is that he shouldn't have courted death and opened Sargera's tomb himself. What? Sargera's tomb? When did the boss of the Burning Legion have a tomb? Ghoul Dan was currently on an island in the broken islands of the Endless Sea. The once beautiful temple was now just a ruined mound. However, the ruined appearance did not matter to him. He could feel a powerful pulse coming from the bottom of the temple. The powerful force tugged at him like an electric current, and he could feel that the whole building was shaking under its influence. Hurry up and go in. He shouted to his warlocks. We have to go in. In reality, he was considering whether to bring his subordinates in. He knew that Sargera's tomb was inside, and there was the Eye of Sargeras inside. It had godlike power, but should he go alone or share this power with the rest of the Shadow Council? In the end, he made up his mind. Since he didn't know what else was in this ancient temple, he felt that it was best to bring them along. If necessary, he could kill them when he found Sargeras' eye. Entering the bottom of the temple, Ghoul Dan found an extremely powerful seal. It was a seal from Aegwin, the previous world guardian. Aegwin's seal targeted almost every intelligent creature in the world of Azeroth, except for the beastmen from Draenor. Gujar easily broke the seal made by the previous guardian, Aegwin. He pulled hard, and the door of the tomb opened. In the next second, endless demons drowned Ghoul Dan and his subordinates. Chapter 524. Orgrim had a very dark dream. Not to mention torches, even the light created by the shaman's natural magic could not penetrate it. The darkness was so cold that his fingers quickly froze. Even his breath quickly turned into ice crystals and fell to the ground. However, in front of him, the darkness slowly and silently wriggled and condensed into the shape of a human. When the dark humanoid opened its eyes, the whole world became even darker. Looking at the pair of eyes that seemed calm and wise, but were actually fierce and lifelike, Orgrim cried out in shock. "You're Duque?" Duque smiled evilly. "Orgrim. You and your tribe will pay for the bloody massacre you caused when you invaded the world of Azeroth. I declare that you will be imprisoned for eternity." "No, we are not wrong. The ones who are wrong are the demons. They poisoned us. They tricked us into drinking that terrible blood." Ignoring Orgrim's protest, the entire world became even darker. Countless dark arms reached out from all directions, firmly suppressing Orgrim's resistance. While laughing eerily, they approached Orgrim and finally grabbed him, throwing him into an eternal prison made of divine power. "Ha ha ha. As long as I, Duque, exist, the tribe can forget about becoming the overlord of this world. Ha 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 ha." Duque's evil laughter echoed endlessly in Orgrim's mind. "Ah!" Orgrim suddenly sat up and screamed, scaring the orcs around him. When he opened his eyes, Orgrim realized that he had just had a nightmare. "Great Chief, you're awake." His face was clearly in a sorry state, and even two of his fangs were broken, but Zulud had a bright smile on his face. "Zulud, I was made a fool of by a dragon cub that couldn't be raised properly. Don't worry, I'll slaughter him and make a stew for myself." At this time, Orgrim realized that all the orcs around him looked like a defeated army. He was carried on a simple stretcher. He heard a loud crashing sound. If he was not wrong, he should be near a giant rock dam. Even though he had a bad feeling, Orgrim still asked, "How's the battle going?" Without hiding anything, Zulud replied, "Terrible." The moment that damned dragon queen regained her freedom, the Dragon Roar tribe's cavalry became snacks for the giant dragons. Then, the giant dragons immediately gathered together and attacked the orcs gathered outside grim battle. Of the hundreds of thousands of orcs, not even half of the tribe survived. Everyone was knocked unconscious. Hearing this, Orgrim felt a sharp pain in his heart. It's all over. It's all over. If it wasn't for the Red Dragon Legion, they would not have been able to. But now, even if the Red Dragon army really didn't like to get involved in mortal wars like the rumors said, the destruction of these troops in the wetlands was enough to cause the greatest adverse impact on the overall situation. Looking at the sky in the distance, there were a few giant dragons flying at high speed. It was obvious that they were in an intense battle. Once upon a time, when he received the report that the Black Dragon King might participate in the battle to liberate the Red Dragon Queen, Orgrim and Zulu had cursed Deathwing for being a busybody. Although he didn't know what role Deathwing played in this incident, Orgrim suddenly hoped that Alexstrasza and her Crimson Dragon Legion would be the victor of this cruel aerial battle. At the same time, on top of Grim Battle Peak, Gavin Rad and the others were dumbfounded. After the battle with the Horde, not only did you, as the Alliance's deputy commander-in-chief, not manage the overall situation, you actually had the nerve to come and watch the show. It was one thing to watch the show, but what was the meaning of taking out so many things? Even if you were a bystander, you should at least have a sense of propriety, right? Looking at what Duque took out from his inventory, everyone was dumbfounded. It was a round dining table with a white tablecloth. Four gorgeous golden wine glasses were placed on the white tablecloth, and the glasses were filled with freshly opened bottles of red wine. The plates, which were as clean as new, were filled with all kinds of snacks. It was a pity that fresh fruits could not be stored in the inventory. Otherwise, this would have been a perfect picnic. "Brother, what are you playing at?" Duque warmly greeted everyone. He pulled out a stool and sat down. "Everyone, don't stand on ceremony. Sit, sit, sit. I've activated the Phantom Mist. Nesario can't see us." "Duque, this doesn't seem like a good idea. What's wrong with it?" "I'm already giving him face by not making cola popcorn." None of the natives of Azeroth knew what cola popcorn was. Seeing that Duque was acting cool, everyone sat down suspiciously. It was Sasha, who was the most curious, who adapted the fastest. She took a sip of the wine and ate the biscuits. Duque? We're here to watch the show. Of course we're here to watch the show. The civil war between the 5 dragon aspects of Azeroth is a once-in-a-lifetime event. If you don't watch it, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Furthermore, Nesario actually wants to brainwash me into becoming his slave. I don't have the ability to participate in such a great battle. I'm happy to watch him get beaten up like a dog. Come, everyone, place your bets. How many minutes can Nesario last from now on? Those who win will get double the compensation. Nesario is the king of the black dragons, after all. 10 minutes. I'll bet a copper. After hanging out with Duque for so long, Gavin Rad had a tendency to fall in the direction of the shame of the paladins. Ronan thought for a moment. A magic jade. 15 minutes. Duque rolled his eyes. Damn it, I was the one who gave you your magic jade. Sasha was the most generous. I'll bet my entire fief that Deathwing won't last 5 minutes. Duque almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Hey. That's enough. Sasha was unmoved. First of all, my legendary fief is still in the hands of the orcs. Second, if I really lose all my fief, then I'll live in Karazhan. Duque's facial muscles kept twitching. He really didn't know that Sasha had such a petulant side to her. If she won, the fief would be doubled, but if she lost, she would blame it on him. It seemed like this lady was going to win no matter what. At this moment, in the sky, the battle between the 5 dragons had entered a white-hot stage. In the beginning, Deathwing was suppressing the 3 giant dragons and beating them fiercely. How fierce was he? Just like Lu Bu. However, when Duque destroyed Demon's soul. Chapter 525. Time went back to more than 10 minutes ago. Deathwing was blasted to the ground by Maligos, the king of magic. Naturally, he was furious. While flying backward at high speed, Deathwing's body grew rapidly, from a small black humanoid to a terrifying existence that was nearly 100 meters long and had a wingspan of tens of meters. Almost at the same time he appeared, the red dragon soaring in the sky also noticed him. Whoa! Without the slightest hesitation, all the red dragons in the sky ignored the orders of the orcs on their backs and attacked Deathwing crazily. Originally, the red dragons did not want to listen to orders from the bottom of their hearts. Coupled with the hatred they had with the black dragons, it had lasted for 10,000 years since ancient times. This hatred, so thick that it could not be dispelled, caused the red dragons to completely lose their minds. Idiots. Looking at these little red dragons, Nesario sneered. At least a dozen red shadows streaked across the sky and flashed towards Deathwing. However, in front of the Black Dragon King who had revealed his true form, these young red dragons were really not enough. That's right, it was different from the 2 red dragons that had ambushed him previously. This was Nesario's perfect form. In contrast to the further enlargement of his body, there was a more terrifying speed, reaction, strength, and vitality. Deathwing dealt with these red dragons so easily that it reminded people of swatting mosquitoes. A single flap of his dragon's wings could tear a red dragon that could not even be dealt with by an entire human army into pieces. A sweep of the dragon's tail could shatter the spine of a dragon that was more than 30 meters long, shattering its body into pieces. In less than half a minute, there were no red dragons that could fly in the entire sky except for him. Deathwing flapped his wings and grabbed a seriously injured dragon high up with his left claw, roaring to celebrate his victory. Blood was still oozing from the deep wound on the victim's chest and abdomen, and his claws also had burn marks. That was the price of touching the acid poison that flowed out of the fire patterns on the black dragon's body. None of the opponents the Wings of Death had encountered had been able to escape this. Are there any more idiots who want to die? Nesario shouted in dragon language. Along with the shout, Deathwing let out a deafening roar. He wanted to let all existences know that he was the supreme overlord, be it the sky or the earth. However, in response to him were several roars from the direction of the grim battle fortress. It turned out that there was more than one idiot who dared to come to die at this time. Deathwing soon discovered them. There were actually 3 idiots, and they were not just 3 ordinary idiots. The beautiful and elegant green, the gorgeous and dazzling blue, and the mysterious and strange earthy color, these 3 colors in his field of vision truly evoked Nesario's ancient memories. Only at this moment did Deathwing confirm that those fellows weren't simply sneakily attacking him through the Emerald Dream. They were truly participating in the battle. Izura, Nosdorm, and my good friend Maligos. Nesario's dragon had a very human-like expression of mockery on his face. Your reckless actions must come to an end, brother. Izura, the Queen of Dreams, said calmly. Brother. I have never been your brother, Izura. Open your eyes and face reality. Now, there is nothing that can stop me from creating this new era that belongs to our dragon race. The Supreme Dragon King, Deathwing? Izura said sarcastically. The Black Dragon King nodded shamelessly. Not bad. This honorable title is indeed worthy of my strength. However, Izura, to prevent your scales from getting hurt, you'd better go back to your dream and sleep. And you, Nosdorm? Aren't you busy playing with mud every day? Ha ha ha. You bunch of idiots, have you forgotten who is the real strongest here? To deal with the 3 of you, I can give you 2 claws. You're dead. As if reflecting his anger, Nosdorm twisted his body, and the huge dragon body made of sand shone with a golden brilliance. At the same time, his gem-like eyes also emitted a dazzling light. I've changed my mind, Nesario. I want you to become my collection in advance. Tisk. Deathwing spat out a corrosive breath disdainfully. What about you, Maligos? Don't you have anything to say to your old friend? Azdakasta. A series of ancient dragon words sounded very elegant, but when translated, it actually meant one thing, F*ck your whole family of females. As a bonus for the answer, the Blue Dragon King opened his huge mouth. A stream of ice shot out from the crisscrossed fangs, crossed the void of 1,000 meters, and accurately brushed past Deathwing's body. No, it was not that Maligos was too accurate, but that Deathwing did not even bother to dodge. As soon as the ice particles came into contact with the terrifying black dragon's body, millions of small crab-like parasites immediately appeared. These insects desperately wanted to tear off the black scales and flesh. Humph. Deathwing snorted coldly, and acid sprayed out from the fiery red patterns on his body. As if covered in a mask, the dragon's entire body was wrapped in sticky black acid. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Countless miserable screams sounded, and almost all the magical creatures released by Maligos died in an instant, leaving only a few. The black dragon skillfully picked up one of the insects with his claws and swallowed it in one gulp. He smiled at the enemies in front of him, revealing a row of sharp teeth. Weak. Too weak. So weak that I'm ashamed to be associated with you. It's all because of your conspiracy back then. Izura said coldly. Ha ha ha. You can only blame yourselves for being too stupid to be deceived. Alright, since you're all as weak as insects, then you should end up like these insects. Nesario suddenly let out an earth-shattering roar and pounced on his opponent. The 3 dragon aspects used all their skills. Maligos' gorgeous magic that could destroy a human city was not dodged by Deathwing. If it were to pierce through a soap bubble, it would be easily broken. Nosdorma's time ability did affect Deathwing, but from the looks of it, the impact would not exceed 2%. It was completely harmless. Izura's mental power attack was more effective, which also caused her to have to bear the most attacks. The battle was one-sided. The 3 dragon aspects used various physical and magical means to attack the Wing of Death, but Neltharion resolved all of them effortlessly. No matter how hard they attacked, the cruel fact would not change, due to the fact that they had contributed a large part of their power to create the dragon soul. These dragon aspects were as weak as newborn babies compared to Deathwing. Chapter 526. The disparity in strength between the 2 sides was too great. This could not be considered a battle at all. If one had to add a definition to such a duel, it would be playing. In addition to the characteristics of the dragon aspects, the three dragons were actually not specialized in melee combat, not even Nosdormu. He was more inclined towards techniques and special abilities. In the end, the three dragon aspects, who were equally famous 10,000 years ago, were chased around like rabbits being chased by Deathwing. Anyone who saw this scene would feel a sense of suffocation. Even Deathwing, who was part of the duel, could not stand it anymore. He could not help but mock, "Poor and sad fellows, is this the limit of your strength? Your strength can't even tickle me, and this is the attack you made with the determination to die? Laughable, too laughable." There was no real anger, nor was there a desperate charge of death. The three dragon aspects seemed to be holding their breaths as they fought with Deathwing. This made Deathwing feel a little bad. "Ha ha ha. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for me to be exhausted and reveal a flaw? Are you waiting for the so-called miracle to happen? Or are you waiting for Alexstrasza to break free and join the siege? Ha 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 ha. I'm dying of laughter. For me, what's the big deal if one more ant joins the battle? Ant? That's not necessarily the case." It was rare for Isra to open his eyes a slit. A psychedelic light flowed out from the dragon's eyelids, making him look very mysterious. "I was prepared to persuade Nosdormu and Malygos to join me and fight to the death with you, but an interesting human gave us a better choice." "Human? Wait. Are you talking about Duque?" Deathwing seemed to be a little panicked. Yes, only a human's dream could bypass his surveillance and directly contact Isra. That's right. At this time, the cunning Black Dragon King suddenly showed a mocking expression. "Idiot. I've never trusted this slippery fellow. He doesn't know what my goal is at all. He can't control the demon's soul, and he doesn't know the incantation to control Alexstrasza." Nesario put forth a great deal of arguments, and they sounded very much like the case. At this moment, Malygos, the king of magic, spat. "That kid doesn't need those things." The king of time, Nosdormu, sneered. "For a character that doesn't exist in the timeline, he has the ability to ignore the maze of lies and directly walk from the beginning to the end. Nesario, you seem to have forgotten that you gave that kid a piece of your scale. The demon's soul can't resist your power." "Impossible. How did you know?" "Hee hee. We just know it." Nosdormu's words were like the curse of death, firmly grasping Nesario's heart. He suddenly realized that he could only count on the female elf who had fallen after being hypnotized and seduced by him. Unfortunately, he was destined to be disappointed. Almost as soon as Nosdormu sentenced him, a colorful light rose from the bottom of the stronghold. Roar! 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 Three dragon roars sounded almost at the same time. The three dragon aspects in front of him seemed to have become larger, as if they had been inflated. Suddenly, their bodies expanded by 3 times, and they became existences about the same size as Nesario. This was not a simple, meaningless transformation spell. This was a change on the level of power. From quality to quantity, it was a change in strength. It was not one dragon, but 3 at the same time, and the same change had occurred. Impossible, the Black Dragon King was suddenly captivated by the chill. This level of power was both unfamiliar and familiar. 10,000 years. It had been a full 10,000 years. Ever since the ancient war 10,000 years ago, when he deceived the 4 dragon aspects and injected their souls and power into the dragon soul, he had never regarded his 4 siblings as opponents. And now, he felt the changes in the 3 dragons in front of him. Even if Nesario didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that his originally perfect plan seemed to have made a fatal mistake. Duque. Hey! Isra! Nosdormu! Do you feel it? Do you feel it? Malygos repeated his question to his siblings nervously. I've regained my power. All the magical elements are crawling in front of me. Ah! How perfect! It's time! Nosdormu replied. His gem-like eyes flashed with an unusually bright light, and he asserted like a charlatan, that's right, fate has shifted. I see that your death has been greatly advanced, Nesario. Yes. It's time. Isra opened her charming eyes. At that moment, her eyes were so eye-catching that Deathwing could only try his best to avoid meeting her psychedelic gaze. The 10,000 years of nightmare is over, she murmured. Our dream of restoring the glory of the dragon race for 10,000 years is finally coming true. At that moment, a clear and melodious roar of a dragon rushed into the sky from the Grimbator fortress below. Within a few seconds, a huge red dragon's shadow began to expand rapidly in the vision of the four dragons. The life-giver, the red dragon Queen Alexstrasza had appeared. At that moment, if Nesario still maintained his human form, his face would be darker than the bottom of a pot. Unfortunately, he was already an ugly and ferocious black dragon. Naturally, he could not be darker. Sister, are you all right? Alexstrasza nodded her huge dragon head. Compared to the torture I've endured, I've gained more. What we lost 10,000 years ago has been returned to us. Demon's soul. That damned, demon's soul, no longer exists. The insignificant human that you despised, Duke Marcus, destroy him. Alexstrasza's declaration resonated with the other three dragon aspects. They all roared in joy. Impossible. Deathwing roared. Lies. All lies. How could someone as wise as me be fooled by a mere human? Impossible, you must be lying to me. The red dragon queen spread her sky-covering wings and revealed her sharp and huge claws. Despite the torture she had suffered when she was imprisoned, she did not look weak at all. No. Alexstrasza corrected him. The only lie that needs to be corrected is your so-called invincibility. Now, use your body to experience whether we have recovered our strength or not. That's right, Nosdormu said hatefully. I've always wanted to prove that it's a ridiculous theory. Chapter 527. Returning to the present, when Duque assumed the posture of an onlooker, he happened to run into the four dragons who had recovered their strength and were fighting each other. It would be perfect if there were kebabs or hot pot at this time. That was what Duque thought. Duque casually asked Gavin Rad, do you think Nesario would feel F***ked when he suddenly found out that his old opponent had regained his strength? It was the first time the paladin had heard the word F***ked. The word was so vivid that it made him look like he was constipated. Ah! The mating of a dragon and a dog. Will a new species called a dragon dog be born? Ronan thought very seriously. Pfft. Sasha was already laughing. What dragon dog? It was clearly Duque teasing Nesario. Duque squinted his eyes and looked at the Dragon King who had been beaten like a dog in the air. He felt great. The word F***ked wasn't enough to describe Nesario's current mood. Wings of Death was indeed suffering. His current situation was like a person teasing a few puppies. At first, he thought that the other party was just a few huskies, but then he realized that they weren't huskies. If it wasn't a dog but a wolf, then forget it. In the end, he realized that the other party had skipped the level of a wolf and went straight to the level of a three-headed hellhound. Wings of Death found that he was being attacked by four types of elemental powers that were almost unfamiliar to him. In the past, when he fought these opponents, it was like he was beating up their illusions. Every move had a gorgeous appearance, but it couldn't cause any substantial damage to him. Now it was completely different. He was facing the full force of the four dragons, and their strength was comparable to his. 1 hit would be very painful, 2 at the same time would be injured, 3 at the same time would be seriously injured, and 4 at the same time would really make him kneel. Nesario was shocked to find that he couldn't resist the combined attack of the four dragons at all. Low-level and low-density magical elements couldn't possibly impact the denser high-level magical elements, so the frost or fire elemental magic that Malygos had blasted at him couldn't shake him at all. The only thing that was more effective was the cloud that Malygos had brought that made him feel a little suffocated. This kind of auxiliary magic that wrapped around his throat and nostrils made him quite angry. What about now? The attacks from Malygos tended to be more direct. The Dragon Queen of Malygos had died at the hands of Neltharion back then, so the Blue Dragon King was furious to the extreme. The attack power of this crazy dragon was almost on par with his. Countless icicles with electricity shot towards Nesario from all directions, and the heat and cold descended on the Black Dragon King at the same time. Although the enchanted plate armor embedded in the Black Dragon's skin could eliminate most of the violent magic storm, it did not mean that the Deathwing could rest easy. That was because the enchanted plate armor was beginning to loosen. Once the plate armor fell off his body would collapse before the other dragons could attack him. Previously, Nozdormu could only speed up the passage of time on Deathwing's body, making him endure the torture of years and slightly drawing away his power. Now, Nozdormu unleashed the quicksand of time on him, continuously stealing the vitality of Deathwing. Deathwing felt weak all over, and the bones in his body stiffened. The most terrifying thing was that even his thinking had become slow. If it was before, Deathwing could stir up the chaotic power in his body and evaporate the quicksand completely before these effects caused permanent damage. But now, Deathwing panicked to find that if he allowed Nozdormu's time power to work endlessly, he would be running in the direction of idiocy, never to return. However, for Deathwing, among the 4 enemies, the most cunning and dangerous one was Isra. Previously, Neltharion, who had already trained multiple dragon traits under the whispers of the ancient god Enzos, could easily sweep away the dreams that Isra had created in his mind. At this time, under the attacks of Malygos and Nozdormu, his energy had been seriously scattered. Relatively, his resistance to the mental domain had also decreased a lot. Isra could easily invade his mind and lead him to the most terrifying nightmare. He seemed to have realized that the nightmares he had created previously were not effective, because this terrifying ancient dragon had seen countless horrors, bloodshed, and cruelty. It was not an easy task to disturb his mind. This time, Isra provided some more absurd nightmares to Deathwing according to the script provided by Du. Although he was in the middle of a fierce battle, Neltharion was daydreaming. I'm a dairy, my name is Leo. I'm a single dog, dragon. My wife ran away, and I don't know where my children, Lien and CIA, have gone. As the 11 is coming, I have nowhere to go, so I can only go on Taba at home. I'm so lonely. I really want to get drunk and forget all my worries. Hey! I only bought 2 bottles of wine, why did my pair of claws get chopped off? Is this the so-called chopping off your hands on Taba? Although he knew that it was a dream, this absurd and incomprehensible dream involved too much of Neltharion's mind. When he came back to his senses, he found that Alexstrasza had already attacked him with a fierce spell that even he did not expect. Neltharion screamed. Even his fine gold armor could not mitigate the terrible impact of this attack. Deathwing immediately released a powerful shield to resist, but he was already injured. His body endured pain that he had not experienced for decades. Just as he was about to fight back, the daydream came again. This time, he turned into a black dog. My name is Black Gooden. My beloved Xiao Hua has eloped with the old Wang dog next door. I'm so sad. Master Enzos is so unscrupulous. He even fed me expired dog food. Woo woo woo. Neltharion had no time to react to what was going on. The pain came again. When he came back to his senses, he was shocked to find that a huge piece of plate armor on his chest had been torn off by the red dragon. The pain of the wound itself was bearable, but what frightened him the most was that he suddenly found that his body was showing signs of cracking again. At this time, Alexstrasza flew in front of him like a goddess of vengeance. She glared at Deathwing, but there was still a trace of pity in her eyes. You have to pay for your conspiracy and betrayal. You will experience all the pain that I have experienced, Black Dragon. Let's see if you can feel better than me. Chapter 528. The momentary panic quickly subsided. Nesario was indeed Nesario, the peerless dragon who had dared to trick more than half of the dragons back then. In addition to being sinister and cunning, his unparalleled ruthlessness and ferocity were also part of his multiple personalities. A furious roar rang out, and a shockwave that could be seen with the naked eye rippled out, causing the remaining clouds in the surroundings to scatter. Deathwing launched a counterattack. A huge sphere made of pure dark energy appeared between his front claws. The dark light that flowed out of the sphere was like a black hole that attracted the attention of the four dragons. Then, he threw the energy sphere behind Alexstrasza to the left, where the other three dragons were. The Red Dragon Queen tried to block it, but the terrifying dragon breath that she spewed out had yet to touch the sphere when the dark energy exploded. It suddenly split into three huge black arrows of light that drew zigzagging arcs in the sky. They strangely ignored the defense and evasion of the three dragons, and directly hit their bodies. Bam! This attack caused Isra and the other two giant dragons to roll back. Alexstrasza tried to use her dragon tail to slap Nesario, but she was trapped by the acidic mist spewed out from the right hind leg of the Black Dragon King. The corrosive mist with dark power stained her tail, and she had no choice but to spray a small dragon breath on her tail to purify it. After easily forcing the four dragons to retreat, Deathwing snarled contemptuously, "Fools! Show me all your ultimate moves. The result will not change. I am the embodiment of power. You are nothing but afterimages of the past in front of me." Nesario's arrogance was justified. When the Titans created the 5 dragon aspects, the strongest was originally Maligos, the king of magic, followed by Nesario, who had the power of the earth. However, after Nesario used Demon's Soul to severely injure Maligos, kill the Blue Dragon King, and annihilate almost the entire Blue Dragon race, Nesario became the boss. Now that Demon's Soul was destroyed, the 4 dragons had only regained their past power. It did not mean that they had completely recovered from their injuries. Therefore, in terms of individual combat power, the Wing of Death, Nesario, was definitely the well-deserved leader. Moreover, there was another problem. Because they had lost their power for over 10,000 years, the 4 dragon aspects were a little unfamiliar with their own power. Obviously, Nesario didn't understand what it meant to be cool for less than 3 seconds. In the next round, he was about to be taught to be a dragon. Maligos's large-scale magic bombardment interfered with his vision. Nozdormu's slow and Isra's nightmare attack arrived at the same time. Deathwing realized that the Red Dragon Queen had removed another piece of plate armor from his thigh. Intense pain that penetrated deep into his heart. Black Dragon, don't underestimate us opponents from the past. Alexstrasza's crimson shadow filled Deathwing's vision. The 4 great dragons worked together so perfectly that even he was a little surprised. What surprised him even more was that the 4 great dragons, for some reason, knew his weakness very well. Their spells were the same as before, unable to cause any substantial damage to him. With his own strength and the protection of the plate armor embedded under the dragon's skin, no one could hurt him in a direct attack. However, tearing off his alloy plate armor was different. They didn't even need to do anything. His own violent power would destroy him. It would have been fine if it was just once, but 2 consecutive targeted attacks made the Black Dragon King shudder. However, Deathwing wasn't someone who would give up so easily. Even if his weakness was exposed, it didn't mean that he would surrender. The dragon aspect's arrogance and insanity drove him. Ha ha ha. Underestimate? I don't need to underestimate you. What's in front of you is the absolute difference in strength. Your combat skills are far inferior to mine. Nesario turned to look at Isra. The key to your attack is on Isra. As long as I withstand her nightmare, I'll be able to kill her. As long as I withstand her nightmare, you can't do anything to me. The Red Dragon Queen's expression changed. The 4 great dragons understood that no matter who fought Deathwing in close combat, they wouldn't be able to do well. If Isra couldn't make him pause for a short while and reveal a flaw, then it would be difficult to fight this battle. However, of course, they wouldn't believe it. The 4 dragons launched their combined attack again. Unfortunately, as Nesario said, he began to resist Isra's nightmare. He even began to affect Isra in the spiritual domain, causing his crazy dreams to invade Isra. The 4 great dragons tried to make a melee attack, but the effect was terrible. Nesario, who was more agile, used his tail to send Alexstrasza flying. His wings slapped Isra and Maligo's heads, and his left claw opened up a huge hole of more than 20 meters in Nosdorm's chest. If Nosdorm wasn't a dragon made of sand and metal, he would have been seriously injured even if he didn't kneel down. Nesario said triumphantly, "Ha ha ha. So what if you've recovered your strength? The era of the four of you is over. After I kill you all, I'll steal all the eggs of your races and create a perfect world that belongs to me." At this time, in the communications circuit that Isra had constructed with dreams, the four great dragons were discussing urgently. What do we do? My magic doesn't have any effect on him. Maligo's was a little discouraged. I'm too slow. I still can't keep up after slowing him down. Nosdorm gritted his teeth. If Sister Isra can still control him. Alexstrasza said unwillingly. At this time, Isra suddenly said weakly, "Actually, I still have a dream that I haven't used. That was given to me by Duque." "Why not?" the three great dragons said in unison. "Because it's too bad." Isra felt like crying. Maligos, who hated Deathwing the most, immediately asked, "What dream is it? Let me see." Isra hesitated for a second while Wings of Death was talking nonsense, but he still released the dream. The Red Dragon Queen's face couldn't get any redder. Nosdorm said, "This must be noted down." Maligo spat. "TSK, she's not my Dragon Queen, why not send it?" Isra was speechless. Finally, Alexstrasza said shyly, "Let's vote. Those who think it can be used raise their claws." 2 firm male claws and 2 weak female dragon claws were raised. Okay, it's unanimous. The next moment, the 4 great dragon aspects attacked again. This time, Isra released a new nightmare for Nesario. In the dream, a very fake black female dragon was being attacked by a Shiba Inu that was full of Photoshop marks. All of this was not the point. The point was that Nesario immediately recognized that the black female dragon was Sinestra, well, his wife. Chapter 529. It was the animal world. It was often shown on CCTV. Hadn't they seen a dog that grew up with a lion in the zoo making a scene with a lioness? Those who hadn't seen it should go and make up for it. Was this dirty? No, this was definitely not dirty. People with dirty minds would think of bathing at the sight of water, and would think of beautiful women bathing at the thought of bathing. People with pure minds, such as Duque, who was known as the honest and reliable little husband, the pure and flawless Marcus, would never think of such things. It was like a guy who called Brother Chun a man all day long. Who would believe that Brother Chun was a real man? Wasn't that right? In any case, with such a clumsy Photoshop, it was obvious that it was fake. Normally, no one would believe it. Whoever believed it was mentally ill. Well, it just so happened that Nesario was mentally ill, so he believed it. The whispers of the ancient gods had long made him unable to distinguish between illusion and reality, and had driven him crazy. Therefore, he was sometimes cunning, sometimes crazy, and sometimes even he did not know what he was doing. At this moment, what appeared in Nesario's mind was his precious son, Nefarian, and precious daughter, Onyxia. The 2 dragon faces had turned into Shiba Inu faces. "Dad, woof woof woof." Nefarian wagged his tail. "Dad, woof woof woof." Onyxia used a Shiba Inu face that came with its own emoji pack to act cute. Then, Nesario had a mental breakdown. He, who thought that he had been cuckolded by a Shiba Inu, let out an extremely tragic cry. "No, how could a dog sleep with my dragon queen?" His voice spread everywhere. In a place far away from the battle, all the red dragons watching from afar were dumbfounded at the same time. The 4 dragon aspects immediately pounced on him, taking advantage of his weakness to kill him. Each dragon aspect used all 4 limbs and the claws on their wings, desperately tearing at the armor on the Wings of Death. 3 seconds. The Wings of Death was stunned for a full 3 seconds. When he came back to his senses, he immediately launched a fierce counterattack, but the 4 dragons quickly dodged like frightened sparrows. Nesario's hasty counterattack did not work. Izura, you're despicable. Nesario's well-founded counterattack left Izura completely speechless. Compared to you who betrayed the entire dragon race. This is nothing. Alexstrasza retorted righteously, even if it is despicable, it is only because Duque is despicable. It has nothing to do with Izura. The Red Dragon Queen decisively sold out Duque. Duque, who was watching from the sidelines, staggered and fell off his chair. What's going on? Spectators number 2, 3, and 4 were shocked. Alexstrasza, you're not kind. What if Nesario comes looking for trouble with me every day? Duque sent a magic message to the queen. Alexstrasza blushed. Well, her face was red to begin with, so there was nothing wrong with it. The queen immediately replied, don't worry, Nesario will not live to see tomorrow's sun. Come on, he's of the earth element. If I hide underground, I won't be able to see him. Don't play word games with me. The others might not know, but Duque was very clear. In the original history, Nesario did not die until many years after the end of World War III. Humph. You make it sound like the 4 of us can't kill him. No, no, no. Your Majesty, regardless of whether there is a video or not, I have completely offended Deathwing in order to save you. I'm just a little mortal. Once he runs away, he will definitely hunt me down. I'm not afraid of 10,000, but just in case. Can you give me a promise? That thing, right? Alright, I promise you, if we really fail, I'll make it happen. Phew. Duque let out a long sigh of relief and pretended that nothing had happened. He sat down again. No, my foot slipped. Pfft, who would believe you? Of course, none of them would expose Duque. Only Duque was secretly happy. That thing, if used well, was a real artifact. At this moment, the battle of the 5 dragons had resumed. Deathwing had fallen into a real disadvantage. The main reason was that the scene was too shocking to him. A huge opening that lasted for 3 seconds allowed the 4 dragons to peel off at least a dozen pieces of armor from his body. Blood, acid mist, lava, and all kinds of things splashed out from his open wounds. Now, it was not the 4 dragons defeating Deathwing, but Deathwing himself defeating himself. Bastard. Duke Marcus. I shouldn't have used your hand, I should have gotten rid of you from the beginning. Deathwing's roar in the common language resounded throughout the wilderness, and almost all the remaining humans and dwarves heard it. At this moment, Duque finally shivered. Facing the gazes of the 3, Duque straightened his back. That guy played dirty, and I hit him back. That's all. Is that wrong? That's right. The 3 of them answered resolutely, but they sighed in their hearts. You even dared to play with Deathwing, who else do you not dare to touch? Above, the 4 dragons continued to attack. Maligos laughed. You still want to take revenge on a little human? You should take care of your body first. Accompanied by laughter, the blue dragon attacked again. Obviously, the current Deathwing was different from before. After large pieces of armor were torn apart, Maligos' magic became the most powerful attack. The Blue Dragon King's magic could easily go through the Black Dragon's bloody wounds and directly hurt the Black Dragon's muscles and internal organs. Deathwing struggled pointlessly, trying to get rid of the other dragon's attacks while shouting, "Bastard, don't force me, or you'll regret it." Regret? On the contrary. I'll only regret it if I don't let you taste the pain I've suffered. The Red Dragon Queen did what she said. She began to bring the power of life into her attacks. The power of life that penetrated Deathwing's body aroused a greater reaction from the dark and chaotic power in his body, tearing his flesh even more violently. In the face of other attacks, even Izura's nightmare, Deathwing could still put up some resistance. But in the face of Alexstrasza's power of life, he could do nothing. Her attacks were accompanied by pain. Deathwing had never experienced the pain of his body being torn apart by a completely different power. The pain flared up in places where claws and fangs could not reach, biting deep in his life. This most terrifying dragon in the world suddenly let out a shrill cry that no one had ever heard before. Ow, 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 ow. This sound contained the power of the whispers of the ancient gods. This scream saved him. The other dragons were shocked by the cry and stopped their spells. Deathwing finally broke free from the encirclement and turned to escape. He flew away at a very fast speed. Although his whole body was still trembling and he was still screaming, he finally succeeded in quickly disappearing from sight. Chapter 530. Seeing the arrogant wings of death suddenly use the ultimate move soaring dragon flash and actually run away with its tail between its legs, every dragon was dumbfounded. Nethario ran away just like that? What happened to the glory of the dragon race? What happened to the resistance to the end? This was not right. We can't let him escape. Nozdormu suddenly came to a realization. Give chase, now. Maligos replied anxiously. Agreed, the Queen of Dreams said calmly. Isra looked at Alexstrasza, who was still circling. Even she was in disbelief at how she had torn the Black Dragon King apart. Sister? Chase. The Red Dragon replied. We have to chase him to the death. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble. The Red Dragon Queen thought of Duque's jinx. If she could not deal with Nethario here, she would owe Duque a huge debt. The 4 dragon aspects flapped their wings at the same time and continuously sped up to chase the rebellious black dragon. Ah! It's gone. Gavin Rad, who was watching the show, looked at the empty sky in shock. I'm still researching how many Breaking Dawn spells each of their moves is equivalent to. Ronan was very professional. What a beautiful firework. Sasha was mischievous. There are more on the ground over there. Duque, who was even more mischievous, pointed at the tribal camp that had been burned to ashes in the distance. Yes, the 5 powerhouses were fighting in the sky, and hundreds of red dragons were cleaning the ground. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. So clean. More than 10 red dragons would descend side by side, like a plane scattering pesticides, covering the entire area. Under the accurately calculated dragon's breath, the scorching flames covered the entire orc camp, leaving nothing behind and no blind spots. When the extremely hot dragon's breath passed, there was not even a struggling man on fire. It was all charred black. Other than the orcs on the outermost periphery of the camp, not many orcs had the chance to escape. However, only the strongest orc clan could occupy the best territory. The flatter and more convenient the territory was, the more powerful the clan would occupy it. Whether it was territory or camp, this had been the rule since ancient times. The result was that almost all the second-tier clans were burned in this battle. Not many of the unranked clans in the periphery escaped. Seeing that there weren't many orcs, the furious red dragons didn't bother to use their dragon breath. They swooped down and picked up the orcs, throwing them high into the sky. Then, the orcs screamed, "Ah!" Some of the orcs just stood there, sweeping their dragon claws from the left and slapping their dragon wings from the right, killing the orcs like how humans would kill cockroaches. The spectators, who had moved their seats to the edge of the cliff at the top of the mountain, had a great time watching. GG. That dragon looks like a newbie. The angle of its dive is terrible, and it can't really use up its dragon breath. Duque made a professional comment. At that moment, Sidan Dathrahan and General Abendis arrived. Duque asked, "Where are Uther and Tyrion?" Sidan was stunned for a moment, then she smiled. To be honest, among the first generation of paladins, only the 3 from Stormwind were close to Duque. These paladins from Lordaeron were only slightly closer to Duque than nodding acquaintances. But Sidan was a friendly person. He didn't care about etiquette and shrugged. "Oh. They're very responsible, unlike a certain deputy commander who slacks off after settling the big things." Sidan's teasing of Duque made Gavin Rad's face turn red. The rest of the assault team was clearly still fighting the stubborn orcs in the passage of the fortress, but they were just spectators. It was a little unkind at the end of the day. Who knew that Duque would be so thick-skinned? Don't abuse the old. I'm old, and it's already amazing that I can complete the mission. I can't fight anymore. The world will belong to you young people in the future. The old man's tone caused the people around him to burst into laughter. But seeing Duque's appearance, Saidan and Abendis couldn't laugh anymore. Most of his hair was white, and the skin on his arms was a little shriveled. When he smiled, his face was full of wrinkles. It was hard to imagine that Duque was actually just a 17-year-old young man. Sir Marcus, your curse. Abendis stopped halfway through his sentence. Duque smiled. The Red Dragon Queen just lifted the curse for me. You've worked hard, Your Excellency. Abendis bowed heavily. Not only that, I'm also very grateful for your help at such a crucial time. Beside him, Saidan bowed together. At this time, it wasn't just Abendis. Everyone present felt the same. Duque had really worked hard. The entire continent, the 10 countries, and the 3 major races added up to almost 10 million people. It was unbelievable that such a thin young man had to bear such a heavy burden. This was the fortune of the alliance, but in a sense, it was also their tragedy. It was precisely because so many kings couldn't come to an agreement that the compromise that seemed so terrible before, but now seemed so wise, letting Anduin and Duque take power. Gavin Rad looked at the destroyed orc camp in the distance with hope in his eyes. If that's the case, maybe the war will end in a year. A year? Duque pursed his lips. The war will end with the Alliance's victory in 4 months. Everyone was shocked. Such a large-scale war between the Alliance and the Horde, and Duque actually said it would end in 4 months? Abendis was the most sensitive about the situation. 4 months? We don't know how many orc reinforcements there are on the other side of the dark portal. Your Excellency, isn't this too? Duque waved his hand. No, 4 months is already a conservative estimate. But it's good that everyone knows this. Don't spread it for now. As for the rest, I'll tell the kings at the throne meeting. At this moment, everyone's eyes were shining with excitement and ecstasy. If someone else had said it, they might have scoffed. But who was the one who said it? It was the deputy commander of the Alliance, the invincible and outstanding military strategist, and the Alliance's hero, Duke Marcus. From the first prediction of the Horde's attack on South Shore to the defense line at the South Stream coast, the Battle of the Hinterlands, the Battle of Cuel Salis, and the Battle of Lordaeron, Duque's military theory of killing the enemy is the most important, had led the Alliance from a disadvantage where all the kings had fallen to the Horde to a path of total victory. If his judgment was still wrong, who else in the Alliance could believe in the inference of the war situation? Really? Sasha was overjoyed. Then what are we waiting for? Quickly go back and tell everyone this news. Anne. Big Sis must be anxious. Duque's facial muscles twitched. I still have to wait for the Red Dragon Queen. I need her to help me recover the life I lost. Otherwise, how can I face people like this? Chapter 531. Duque had never been handsome. Compared to Lothar in the movie, he was much less handsome. But this didn't mean that Duque had to accept himself as an old man. Looking at the white-haired Khadgar in the movie, Duque was already pissed. Now that he had become himself. Who could stand a transmigrator suddenly turning into an old man? Fortunately, he still had the Red Dragon Queen as a backup. Alexstrasza, who had bestowed the World Tree with life and the Night Elves with eternal life, could easily make up for his losses. However, Duque didn't expect Sasha to suddenly say, "Don't worry. No matter what you become, I'll still like you." Pfft. The group of single dogs around him all spat out. A group of people stared straight at Duque, as if they wanted to gouge out a piece of flesh from Duque's face. In public, Duque's behavior left people speechless. In private, wasn't it enough that he had Aurelia? He even went after his sister-in-law when most of his men were still single. Did he still have any humanity left? Fine, you're powerful. Go ahead and do it, but do you have to show off your love in front of us? Don't you know that showing off your love is faster? All of a sudden, the guys wanted to borrow flamethrowers from the FFF guild to burn Duque too. Duque was dumbfounded. You don't have to do that even if you want to attract hatred. Will anyone protect me in the future? The innocent Sasha blinked her eyes, as if she did not understand why the atmosphere had suddenly become so strange. Gavin Rad blinked. Boss, give me a piece of land in the elven forest. I'll forget about the trauma you caused me today. Duque quickly agreed. Okay. As for the other two singles, Sidan and Abendis, Duque promised to invite them to the Dream Angel Salon in Lordaeron for 3 days. What was a Dream Angel? Even though Sidan gave Duque a, you know what I mean, look, a pure, holy, and upright person like Duque certainly wouldn't understand. Blarg. Well, I'm still a 17-year-old kid. Regardless of whether others believed it or not, Duque believed it himself. To Duque's surprise, the Red Dragon Queen did not appear even after he waited until nightfall. Who knew if they chased Nesario from the Eastern Kingdom all the way to Northrend in the north, then flew to the Kalandor continent, then circled around Pantalia and completed the magnificent feat of flying around the world. Needless to say, the 5 silly guardian dragons with almost unlimited stamina and driven by their deep hatred might really be able to do it. With no other choice, Duque could only open the portal and return to the Dalajan first. What he didn't know was that the Dalajan, no, almost all the major cities in the Alliance's territory that received the latest news were in an uproar. The Alliance's deputy commander Duke Marcus has liberated the Red Dragon Queen from the evil orcs. 200,000 orcs under the Grimbader fortress in the wetlands have been killed by the Red Dragon's dragon breath. The horde has suffered a crushing defeat and has begun to retreat from the earthy highlands. The Red Dragon army has become the humans' ally again. The Alliance has won. Cheering crowds could be seen everywhere. People were shouting, cheering, and roaring at the sky in ecstasy. Whose tears were flying? Whose smile was in full bloom? As long as one was wearing the Alliance's uniform, be it a 60-year-old uncle or a teenage boy, they would definitely be warmly welcomed by the people. There was an old man holding a collection of fine wine, a beautiful young lady who was as passionate as fire, and a smiling child. Everyone was praising the Alliance in their own way. However, this had nothing to do with Lordaeron. After sending out 1,000 people and 250 people, only 192 people returned alive, including those who had lost arms and legs and could no longer fight on the battlefield. The actual loss was more than 90%. It was no exaggeration to say that the elites of Lordaeron were almost burned to the ground. If they had paid such a huge sacrifice in exchange for an equivalent merit, King Tarinas of Lordaeron might feel better. The point was, most of those who came back alive were the paladins of the Silver Hand. Fairness and honesty were the virtues. The paladins of the Supreme Creed. These guys would never lie. They would say to everyone they met, we launched a surprise attack at the worst possible time. We encountered the main force of the horde. If it wasn't for Sir Marcus's help, we would have been completely wiped out. Duque. Duque. And it was still Duque. It was as if as long as Duque was still alive, Lordaeron would not be able to rise again. Lordaeron had paid an unimaginably high price for this. More than 1,000 elite knights, mages, priests, hunters, and bandits had died. What did they get in exchange? A wrong time to launch a surprise attack. Tarinas almost spat out a mouthful of blood. So the Lordaeron had paid such a heavy price in exchange for a successful, feint attack. If these 1,000 people were put on the battlefield, they would definitely be able to open up new territories. He died quietly in the fortress of Grimbator. It could be said that a general success was built on 10,000 bones. Damn it, Duque had become a general. Why did the people of Lordaeron have to be the 10,000 bones? When he heard the complete news, Tarinas choked on his breath. He coughed so hard that tears came out of his eyes. He coughed so hard that he almost coughed his lungs out. He was bitter. He hated it. He used to hate the horde that turned the Silverpine forest into scorched earth. Now, he suddenly realized that he hated Duque even more, who always stole the limelight from Lordaeron. Before this, he had never imagined that there would be a day when he, the king of the strongest kingdom on the continent, would be jealous of a young man who once had nothing. At this moment, he even wanted to assassinate Duque. But he did not dare to do so. Duque, who had returned from hell, was already the #1 hero of the alliance. And look at Stormwind's attitude. If he dared to touch Duque, Lang would definitely send out 200,000 troops to fight him. The kingdoms that were on good terms with Duque would definitely not sit back and watch. Turinas secretly gritted his teeth and swallowed his anger. On the other side, Stormwind held a grand welcome ceremony for Duque's return. Duque. Lang rushed up to Duque the moment he stepped out of the portal and gave Duque a bear hug. Cough, cough, cough. Let me go. Duque's face was pale. As soon as Lang let go, Anduin immediately followed up. Duque, cough, cough, cough. I'm dying. Duque's face was pale. Ah. Duque, what's wrong? Duke Bolvar wanted to take the third hit, but he was shocked to find that Duque was almost dead. It was a mess. Chapter 532. Only those who had almost lost it would cherish it. It was precisely because Lang thought that he was about to lose Duque, his most staunch and powerful supporter since the destruction of the Storm Kingdom, that Lang's mood fell into the abyss. Now, don't be fooled by Duke's pitiful appearance. Under the premise that Duke's life wasn't in danger, Duke's pitiful appearance was just a bit of entertainment. The haze of the nightmare had dissipated. A brilliant future was in front of him. How could Lang not cry with joy? That's right. King Lang's eyes were red and moist. Countless pairs of eyes were focused on Duque, who was teasing the king and his ministers. General Tom Seamus looked at Duque, took a deep breath, and roared in a loud and majestic voice. To the hero of the alliance, the Grand Duke of Stormwind, His Excellency Duke Marcus. 3,000 Stormwind soldiers, in a uniform movement, followed General Seamus, drew their swords out of their sheaths, raised their hands to the sky, and saluted Duque in unison. At this moment, the swordlight was like a forest, swallowing mountains and rivers. To His Excellency Marcus. The domineering shout echoed throughout the Dalajan city. These soldiers were not just guards of honor. They came from all over Stormwind, from the most elite Griffin Legion, to the local garrison, to the militia with minimal military training, and even to the refugees who came to South Shore with the refugee fleet. But now, they all had a unified name, Stormwind Elite Soldiers. Each of their hands was stained with the blood of at least 5 orc warriors. They were not only the elites of Stormwind, but also first-class soldiers in the entire alliance. Strong, firm, with combat skills and iron discipline. However, it was such a soldier that everyone's voice carried a sense of worship. Although Duque had long since stopped directly commanding the army of Stormwind, and even the private corps he led alone reached as many as 30,000 people, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was the king's subordinate, but the mention of the name Duke Marcus still made people in awe. To the people of Storm, it was he who subdued the Bloodsail fleet and saved 600,000 civilians from certain death under the noses of hundreds of thousands of orcs. It was him who brought life-saving food to the 600,000 starving refugees and opened up countless wastelands in the Hillsbrad Hills so that the people could live a peaceful life. To the Storm's soldiers, the burning of Stormwind City, the ambush at Barradine Bay, the first and second defense of South Shore, the battle of the Hinterlands, the defense of Lordaeron, and the battle to save the Red Dragon Queen. Duque's name was equal to the glory of a warrior, equal to a miracle. He was synonymous with the god of war. Such a legendary figure was only 17 years old. Looking at Duque's white hair, looking at the wrinkles on Duque's hand that looked like an old man's, thinking of the curse he had received, thinking of the suffering he had to endure for this destroyed kingdom, every soldier's eyes were as red as King Lang's. A sea appeared in front of Duque. It was a sea constructed by the gleam of swords. The sharp swords were raised at a 45-degree angle. As Lang, Anduin, and Duque moved forward, they suddenly parted one by one. It was like the miracles of a sword parting the sea in a legend. The sea parted. At the end of the sea, the king and his two ministers sat in an open carriage and slowly set off towards the violet square in the center of the Dalian kingdom. Although the sky was dark, cheers could be heard on both sides of the road. Countless Dalian people, mage apprentices, and mages crowded on both sides of the road, trying to see the glory of the #1 legendary mage in the alliance. If it was anyone else, even if he was a king, the Dalian mages would not be so revered. This was an era where the spirit of chivalry was the most revered. Looking at the 7 human kingdoms, except for the Dalian, no king was a mage. In most human settlements, only the general who led the army to charge would be recognized as a true hero. Mages, on the other hand, were just mysterious people who hid in the protection of the army and released sinister magic. In a sense, it was precisely because of the prejudice of the majority that Duque, a mage hero, was even more precious. Duque was the Grand Duke of Stormwind, but was that important? Didn't they see that even the Prince of Kuel's Salis was mingling in the Dalian? As long as he was a hero in the field of magic, he would naturally be warmly welcomed by the Dalian people. In their opinion, Duque, who had once lectured in the Dalian, was undoubtedly a member of the Dalian. Duque! 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 The uniform shouts were like a tsunami, rising and falling one after another. The scene and atmosphere made King Lang, who sat opposite Duque, and Andoin, who sat beside Duque, become foils. Of course, neither of them cared. They just smiled at Duque. Duque gently waved his right hand while his left raised the marshal's combat staff from Antonidas. Even after the direct attack of the Wings of Death's shadow flames and such a violent explosion, there was not a single scratch left on it. The staff was still shining with silver light. The head of a winged horse was carved on the staff, emitting a faint silver light. It looked extremely holy and beautiful. When Duque raised the shining staff made by the Dalian, the crowd's cheers reached its peak. In the square, the representatives of the 9 countries of the alliance, except for Stormwind, had already gathered. Looking at Duque, every king and every representative had a complicated feeling. They did not expect Duque to do it. With his almost dead body, he led a small team of 5 and penetrated thousands of miles behind enemy lines. He sneaked into the heavily guarded Grim Battle Fortress while the Red Dragon patrolled in the sky and the Beastmen roamed the wetlands. He cleverly used the Wings of Death's plot to complete the feat of liberating the Red Dragon Queen. If Duque could be said to be a wise man and a commander who only knew how to command, the current Duque was like a real hero who had been quenched in a furnace. After a real test, he was reborn and became a real hero of the Alliance. His reputation as a hero had been completely established. No matter what happened to Duque in the future, he would become an indelible legend in the history of the Alliance. No matter how much the King of Tarinas secretly mocked Duque, he had to put on a smile and welcome Duque. However, an accident that no one could have imagined happened at this moment. An abrupt voice suddenly rang out in front of the drum music. Duque, you have become a hero. You also told us that the Red Dragon Legion is no longer a part of the tribe. So, I want to ask you, who should I look for to avenge my son's death? If it was some blind pawn, perhaps he would have been dragged out and killed by the angry soldiers after saying this. But the person who said this was King Kurtiras, Dalen Proudmoore. Chapter 533. As soon as these words came out, the entire place went silent. Everyone could understand the anger of a father who had lost his son. Everyone could understand the sadness of a king who had lost his heir. Since ancient times, it had always been a sad thing for a white-haired person to send off a black-haired person. But this was the Alliance Conference. Honoring Duque, the hero of the Alliance, was the most important ceremony to show the might of the Alliance after all the suffering he had brought to the Horde. Look, even though the Rotterdam Kingdom had suffered the worst loss, Tarinas still stood there with a look of pride on his face. What's more, this was the Crimson Dragon army, which had extraordinary power. If the Queen was angry, the entire human race would be destroyed, and all the major human cities would cease to exist. Humans would once again split into countless small clans, and return to the position of being at the mercy of others 3,000 years ago. In the end, the Crimson Dragon army was being threatened, and there were not so many ancient red dragons coming out to harm the Alliance. Otherwise, the Alliance would have been destroyed. Now that you, a mere King Kultiras, have caused a ruckus at this time, who would want to please you? Who would dare to support you? Silence. Deathly silence. In fact, Daelin knew that he would not be supported by any country. He also knew that he should be like Tarina's and swallow his anger. Unfortunately, he couldn't do it. As soon as he closed his eyes, he saw his eldest son, Drake, being burned to ashes by the raging flames. His son's soul haunted his soul. He could not swallow this, not as a father, but as a king. Even though he knew that it was not the right time to say it, he felt that if he did not say it today, he would never have the courage to say it again. He would not have the right to be a father. The air was freezing. The temperature was dropping. Daelin's eyes were filled with tears as he knelt on the cold floor. Perhaps this was a plea, or perhaps it was a form of self-repentance. In any case, he ignored everyone's gaze and disrupted the festive atmosphere. He knelt there. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of him. A figure wearing a mage robe. Other than Antonidas, there was only one person who had the right to wear a mage robe and stand in front of him, Duque. In his heart, Duque was the man who had sacrificed the lives of millions to become a hero. Sigh. Duque patted Daelin's shoulder and said something that not only Daelin, but all the other kings did not dare to believe. Daelin, get up. I'll get Alexstrasza to give you an explanation. What? To make the Red Dragon Queen, one of the world's 5 dragon aspects, give an explanation to the king of a mere human kingdom? What kind of joke was this? It was like asking a lion to apologize to the ant's relatives for accidentally stepping on it and then asking the lion to apologize to the ant's relatives. Since ancient times, who wouldn't admit that they were unlucky to encounter such an extraordinary existence? It was one thing for Daelin to go crazy. Duque was going to join him in his madness? What if they infuriated the Crimson Dragon army and caused these abnormal lizards to stand against humans again? Anyone who could become a king was no longer a brute. At this moment, almost all the kings were going crazy. Antonidas could clearly sense that Duque had already sent out a magic message. Wait for 10 minutes. The Crimson Dragon race will give the Alliance an explanation. An explanation? There really was one? Since ancient times, anyone who slayed a dragon would definitely be regarded as a hero by the entire human world. Only the truly high-ranking people knew that those who were slain were lone dragons. They were either banished by the dragons for committing a crime, or they were the descendants of the black dragon that the 4-color dragons did not like. Now, all the kings and representatives were dumbfounded. They stared at the sky blankly. King Daelin looked at Duque in disbelief. After making sure that Duque's face did not show any signs of lying, he stood up with his sword. Facing the night wind, he stared at the pitch-black sky quietly. 10 minutes. Usually, it would be over in a moment. Unfortunately, the oppressive atmosphere made the passage of time extremely slow. Everyone's forehead was dripping with sweat. Everyone was quietly waiting for their judgment, waiting for the one that might appear in the sky. Around 9 minutes later, the moonlight suddenly dimmed. The bright moonlight was blocked by a huge creature. As expected, it was a dragon. It spread its wings, and its scales shone with a dazzling red light. The huge golden vertical pupils seemed to be flowing with blazing lava. The 2 pairs of fiery horns on his high head were raised high, looking down at the monarchs in the violet square from high above. Compared to this terrifying creature that came from the ancient times more than 10,000 years ago, the armies of the mortal world, status, and power all seemed insignificant. When the dragon soared in the clouds, humans were just ants crawling on the ground. The sky was their domain, and they ruled over the sky. Even though it was easy for different races to have facial blindness, after many days of fighting, every alliance had recognized every single characteristic of this most ferocious ancient dragon. There was no mistake. He was Tyrannies, the one who had sent over 10,000 Alliance soldiers into the Sea of Fire. Every Alliance soldier nervously clenched their weapons. The higher-ups had indeed announced that the Red Dragon army was no longer an enemy, but who knew if this ferocious lizard would suddenly go berserk? The Dalajan's magic defense system could indeed destroy him, but before this behemoth crashed to the ground, how many people would be killed by him? No one was sure. However, under the watchful eyes of more than 100,000 people, Tyrannies, who had just landed on the specially empty space in Violet Square, suddenly began to shrink. A dragon that could easily weigh more than 1,000 tons became the size of a human. No matter how many times Duque saw this situation, he still felt that it was magical. It was full of all kinds of unscientific things. Of course, pursuing science in a magical world was not a reliable thing to begin with. What appeared in front of the kings was an old man with long white hair, a white beard, and white eyebrows. He was not wearing a piece of armor, only a Greek-like cloth skirt around his waist. His upper body was bare, revealing a strong but full of scars. Who is it? The one who claims to want the ancient dragon Tyrannies to give him an explanation? Don't make it easy for me to find you. Come out yourself. The humanoid dragon released a fierce aura, with a dragon's roar that made countless people tremble. Chapter 534. On the square, the morale of the Dalajan and Gilnea's soldiers was low. The sound of their metal leg guards retreating was piercing to the ears. At close range, the kings who were suffering from the dragon's wrath did not fare as well. Each of them made a fool of themselves, but Tyrannies was undoubtedly the worst. Tyrannies, who only had a combat level of 5, was frightened by the dragon's wrath. He took 3 steps back and collapsed on his throne. Of course, the other kings either took half a step back or knelt on one knee. Even Lang sighed and took a step back. He did not look at Tyrannistas in the eye. Only Dalen Proudmoore held onto his scimitar and gritted his teeth. Even though his legs were shaking, even though the veins on his neck were bulging, even though the veins on the back of his hands were bulging like a dragon's beard, he persevered and faced the terrifying golden pupils of the ancient red dragon without fear. Dalen suddenly took a step forward and raised his scimitar at the dragon. It's me, Dalen Proudmoore of the Kingdom of Cultiras. This has nothing to do with the Alliance, and it has nothing to do with my kingdom. As a father, I seek justice for my son, Drake Proudmoore, who died under your flames. Dalen was going all out. He was going all out. Of course, he hated the culprit's tribe. However, he was also unable to accept the fact that the murderer who had just killed his son yesterday was now standing beside him as an ally of the Red Dragon Alliance. Then, he would have to suck up to these powerful allies and pretend that nothing had happened to fight alongside the Red Dragon. Of course, he could not forgive himself for causing the entire kingdom of Cultiras to be engulfed by the dragon's flames because of a personal grudge. So, as a father who had lost his son, he challenged Tyrannistas. Huh? What kind of justice do you want? The dragon's tone was full of disdain. A duel. Dalen's voice was powerful. He raised his scimitar and took another step forward. His bloodshot eyes stared at the dragon. Ha 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 ha. The giant dragon's laughter shocked everyone in the square. You? Everyone felt as if a boulder was pressing down on their chests under the terrifying dragon's might, making it hard for them to breathe. Dai Lin, who had endured the greatest pressure, was bleeding from the corner of his mouth. No one knew whether it was because of the shock or because he had bitten his lips. Yes. Just me. A tiny human in the eyes of a giant dragon. I know I can't beat you, but I demand a duel at least. This is my last honor as a father. Almost as soon as Dai Lin finished speaking, an anxious voice came from outside. No, father, don't do anything stupid. Dalen's expression changed. He knew who the voice belonged to, Thenreed Proudmoore, Dalen's second son, the de facto crown prince of Cultiras kingdom. At that moment, Dalen saw a streak of gold in his peripheral vision. It was his lover, Gina Goldsword. Daylin knew that she had broken the taboo and used the teleportation gate to summon Than Reed to stop him from doing anything stupid. If Than Reed was affected by the dragon's anger, there would be no male heir in Tira's kingdom. Gina Goldsword's actions hit Daylin's weak spot. Daylin's facial muscles were twitching. Various thoughts were fighting in his mind. The humanoid dragon sneered, "That's right. You have no chance of winning a duel with a giant dragon. Go back and look after your children. I can't guarantee that your family won't be affected during the duel. You know that it's hard to control dragon breath once it's released." At that moment, Daylin's expression turned cold. He suddenly shouted, "Someone stop Than Reed. I, Daylin Proudmoore, will be eternally grateful to him." The gratitude of someone who was about to die? At the same time, his descendants would hate him for eternity? Was there really someone willing to do such a stupid deal? Don't be surprised. Someone really did. Whoosh! A strong gust of wind blew. A huge ice wall that was 3 meters tall, 20 meters wide, and half a meter thick appeared in front of Than Reed and Gina. The one who made the move was actually Dooku. Daylin wasn't the only one who was shocked. All the other kings were shocked. Dooku used his other hand to stop Sasha, who seemed to want to do something. He looked at Daylin calmly. "You wanted me to help you get an explanation from the Red Dragon army, and I did. You wanted me to stop the next king of Tira's, and I did. You owe me 2 favors. 2 favors? Do dead people need to repay favors?" Daylin suddenly smiled. There were tears in his smile, and there was also a hint of desolation. "From today onwards, Dooku, you are my brother." Without saying anything else, Daylin ignored his son and lover's pleas. He walked forward and threw away his scabbard and armor. This heroic man who had traversed the seas for 20 years, just like that, bare-chested, proudly walked towards the opponent he would normally never be able to defeat. "Ha ha ha. My chest is here. Do you dare stab me here?" Talonistas laughed haughtily, slapping his broad, muscular chest. There was no sound. Daylin used his scimitar to give his answer as a father. He suddenly lunged forward, lowered his wrist, and stabbed forward. The scimitar was best at slashing, but that didn't mean that the sharp tip was just for show. Daylin's thrust was the limit of a human warrior. He turned into a stream of light, and he and the scimitar became one as he stabbed toward Tyrannies. This was the most perfect stab Daylin had made since he entered the realm of heroes. Perhaps to the dragon's horrifying dynamic vision, this stab was like slow motion, not worth mentioning. Perhaps after this stab, he would be tortured to death by the human-shaped dragon in any way. However, he didn't care. He got rid of all distracting thoughts. He only wanted justice for that stab. The millions of people present couldn't bear to watch anymore. A few kings secretly closed their eyes. Only Dooku calmly watched all of this with a slightly sorrowful expression. Time seemed to freeze. There was no lightning-fast counterattack. There was no bloody and cruel killing. When he clearly felt the scimitar stabbing into flesh, Daylin was stunned. The audience was so shocked that they couldn't speak. This was because Daylin's epic scimitar, which was far from being able to slay a dragon, had slashed horizontally, and the sharp tip of the scimitar pierced through the gap between 2 ribs on the human-shaped Tyranni's left chest. The scimitar pierced the human-shaped dragon's heart in half. How is this possible? Chapter 535. Everyone's faces were filled with shock and confusion. Tyranni's extremely weak but clear voice could be heard. "Don't be shocked. In some ways, I feel the same way as you. For my beloved queen, I'm willing to give up everything. For her to suffer less, I'm willing to blind my own conscience and sully my own soul. I'm willing to kill humans for the filthy orcs. So, this is my atonement. You." Daylin's hand went limp without him realizing it. He held the humanoid red dragon that was about to fall, feeling a little lost. "Yes. This is the Red Dragon race's answer to you, to humans, and to the entire alliance. I wonder, are you satisfied now? He wanted to say yes, but when the words came to his mouth, Dalen's mouth was filled with bitterness. He could not say it no matter what. Don't be shocked. You earned this yourself. If you're just a coward, I'll tear you apart in one bite. I, Tyrannes, have ruled this world for 10,000 years. I will not die in the hands of a piece of trash. Even though Dalen could clearly feel the dragon's life slipping away, the dragon's voice was still very clear. Hiss. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The red dragon's arrogance was ingrained in their bones. Ordinary people, no matter how high their status was or how good their reasons were, had no right to demand justice from the Red Dragon army. As expected, only heroes had the right to be acknowledged by the dragons. Thinking of this, everyone could not help but respect Dalen. Tyrannes was still speaking. I know that I've sinned greatly. So, after I die, you can do whatever you want with my body as compensation to you and the entire alliance. However, this is all the compensation from the Red Dragon army. Suddenly, the humanoid Tyrannistas pushed Dalen away. Then, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, his body began to grow rapidly. In less than 3 seconds, he turned back into the dragon that was dozens of meters long. However, unlike the mighty and domineering aura from before, this time, this giant dragon finally began to walk towards the end of its life. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. When the huge body of the dragon was no longer moving, everyone could confirm that the terrible dragon that had been wreaking havoc in the Earthy Highlands and the Hillsbrad area for months, and even destroyed the entire king city of Riptide Castle, had finally made up for the sins it had committed. Suddenly, someone started applauding. It was Duque. He applauded his brave father, who knew that he was no match for the dragon, but still dared to challenge it alone. Clap clap. The clear and unique applause attracted everyone's attention. Clap clap clap. More people started clapping. Paw 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 paw. They were the elite soldiers of the various countries who were still in the plaza. They were slapping their swords against their shields. They were saluting Dai Lin in a warrior's way. However, the winner of this slightly special dragon-slaying battle was sitting paralyzed on the ground, unable to get up. Everyone could see the cold sweat glistening on his back. Gina and Tanreed hurried over to help Dalen up. King Dalen didn't go back to rest. Instead, he insisted on coming to Duque. Thank you, Brother Duque. The hero of the 7 seas smiled sincerely. Even after this battle is over, you must come to cultivation more often. Of course, of course. Duque smiled. Dalen glanced at Lang, who was beside Duque, and whispered to Lang, if Lang or William don't treat you well, you can come to cultivation. You can choose between a prince or a duke. Hey. Hey. Lang pretended to be angry. On the other side, a triumphant ceremony that had been specially prepared for Duque had been disrupted by Dalen. In less than 10 minutes, the ceremony was dismissed hastily. Of course, some people were unhappy about this incident. Some politicians even secretly cursed Dalen, saying that Dalen had wiped out the cooperation between the Crimson Dragon Army and the Alliance, or more accurately, the Crimson Dragon Army and the humans. Afterwards, in the state guesthouse, Lang also asked Duque about the Crimson Dragon Army. Duque pondered for a while, and decided to reveal the truth to Lang and Andoin. I didn't expect Tyrannes to do that. That's an ancient Crimson Dragon. Will the Crimson Dragon Army really not mind a powerhouse second only to the Queen? It's alright. Because Tyrannes was about to die anyway. Lang and Andoin were shocked at the same time. Isn't the life of a dragon unlimited? Andoin asked in bewilderment. Yes. However, even the life-giver can't deal with the torture of the disease. Tyrannes has been suffering from the disease for many years. This is no secret among the dragons. His vitality has been weakening, and he has only lived for so long because of Alexstras's support. Duque sighed. Lang asked, then did he do so much for the queen purely to repay her kindness? And in order to heal the enmity between the Crimson Dragon army and the Alliance, he deliberately sacrificed himself? Duque smiled bitterly. I can't answer that question. But I think the window of cooperation with the Crimson Dragon army is not completely closed. Anduin immediately perked up. You're saying that the Alliance can form a legion of Dragon Knights. The Orcs' Dragon Knights really made the Alliance suffer. Even with the support of the Wildhammer dwarves from the Eagle Nest Mountain, the Alliance actually lost more than they won. After all, the limit of the Griffins' talent was there. Compared to the WIRMS, they were far inferior. Duque smiled slyly. It's Stormwind that has the opportunity to form a legion of Dragon Knights. This sentence really made Lang and Anduin laugh uncontrollably. Okay, the last question. Duque, how do you solve the problem? That's my personal secret. Duque smiled mysteriously. After sending off the 2 leaders of Stormwind, Duque suddenly found a red-haired beauty holding a large bottle of wine on his windowsill while taking a shower. The iconic fiery red bikini armor with gold-rimmed edges, and the tall dragon horns on her head all spoke of the owner's identity, the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Gazing at the bright moon, the queen murmured softly, I realize that human wine can sometimes be a good thing. At least it can numb my nerves when I don't want to think about things. Duque smiled faintly. Don't joke around. This bit of wine can't numb your nerves. If I force my vitality down to 1/10,000th, then it'll be fine. The queen looked back with a sad expression. She seemed to want to cry, but couldn't. Chapter 536. Duque would never have thought that the all-powerful Dragon Queen throughout Azeroth's history would have such an emotional side. Tyrannies is very important to you, right? Her slender fingers stroked the mouth of the bottle. The queen seemed to be lost in her memories. I don't know. That guy chased me for more than 10,000 years, but I never accepted him. Duque realized that there was a very important difference in history here. In the original history, Tyrannies was the queen's oldest partner. But in this life, why did he chase the queen for 10,000 years without success? He's too weak. The queen showed a helpless expression. I was born the largest dragon in the entire race. Once, he tried to pounce on me half-heartedly, but I smacked him with my wings and broke 7 of his ribs. Duque was speechless. Once, I deliberately held back and let him come closer. In the end, I was careless and he broke another leg. Duque thought to himself, I understand why Tyrannies lived a short life now. At this point, the queen took another big gulp of wine. But things like feelings don't only occur between males and females. It's like how humans keep pets. After a long time, there will always be a sense of kinship, no matter what, right? Yes. Duque didn't say anything. He knew that what Alexstrasza needed the most right now was a listener, not someone to give her advice. 10,000 years. When I woke up from my sleep, the first thing I saw was his ugly face. The first thing I saw before I fell asleep was his face. He was weak, but he treated me so well that I have nothing to say. The queen took another sip of wine. But I enjoyed the praise of mortals and was called the giver of eternal life, but I couldn't cure his disease. No matter how much life force I inject into his body every morning, it will be completely devoured by the evil disease in his body the next day. Duque was silent. Why did it sound like cancer cells on Earth? When he realized that I couldn't take the torture anymore and was about to lose the protection of the dragon egg, he took the initiative to ask the beastmen to fight. I know that he wanted to end his own life. He wanted to die gloriously on the battlefield. This was his dream for the past 10,000 years. Now that he has chosen to die to atone for his sins, it can be considered a worthy death. Sigh. Duque sighed softly. At that moment, the queen seemed to be a little drunk. She reached for the dimensional bag on her waist and took out the wrong thing several times. In the end, she took out a platinum disc that was only 1/5 of its original size and threw it to Duque. "This is the talisman you wanted. I convinced the three of them to modify it according to your request." When Duque saw this, his whole body shivered. "Oh my God. They're really willing to cook for me. It's really worth it for me to sell my body and become an old man. I've been living in the wilderness, enduring the cold and wind. I've been hunted by giant dragons in the sky, and I've been hiding from orcs on the ground. I've even had to play a mental game with Nesario. It's all worth it. Demon's Soul, no, according to the system's prompt, this should be called Wrath of the Dragon." As Duque expected, the 4 dragon aspects failed to kill Nesario. The cunning Deathwing did not forget his instincts as an earth dragon. Under the joint pursuit of the 4 great dragons, he actually plunged headfirst into a huge volcano crater, desperately drilling into the high-temperature lava underground. Among the 4 dragons, Alexstrasza and Nosdormu could barely catch up. However, Isra and Maligos could not. 2 against 1, and fighting in the earth and lava that Nesario was familiar with, the 2 of them had no chance of winning, so they could only give up. In return for Duque's efforts in facilitating this incident, the 4 dragon aspects agreed to purify and transform the remaining, Demon's Soul, into an amulet specifically for the Black Dragon race. The system prompt was as follows: Demi-artifact, Wrath of the Dragon. This is a targeted demi-artifact modified by the 4 dragon aspects, excluding the Earth Dragon, Nesario. The original prototype of this demi-artifact was the Soul of the Dragon, that once shocked the universe and destroyed the entire Burning Legion fleet in one blow. After several modifications, with most of its functions lost, it was transformed into a special demi-artifact for Duke Marcus. Wrath of the Dragon, Special Effect 1, Crisis Perception. Since there are 2 Black Dragon King scales in the demigod artifact that contain 12% of the Deathwing, Nesario's soul, when Nesario appears within 5,000 meters of the host will automatically sense the distance, direction, and form of Nesario. Wrath of the Dragon, Special Effect 2, Soul Punishment. Activating the divine power infused by the 4 dragon aspects can launch a mental attack that directly targets Nesario's soul. The attack time is up to 5 minutes, and during the special effect period, Nesario's combat power will drop by about 30%. Wrath of the Dragon, Special Effect 3, Black Dragon Torment. As Nesario is the king of the Black Dragons, he is the ancestor of all Black Dragons. Activating this special effect can directly torture the soul of any Black Dragon descendant. The closer the distance, the purer the bloodline, and the greater the power. After reading these instructions, Duque was so elated that he wanted to hold Alexstrasza's face and kiss her a few times. He did not expect that she would come to him before he could even kiss her. "Hey, it's time to replenish the life force that you've lost. I can't stand the sight of an old man like you. Let's talk about it. Why do you have to take off my shirt?" Duque was shocked. However, he could not resist. She even wanted to drink the dragon's power potion to make herself extremely strong. This fellow did not need to drink any potions at all. Because the fellow in front of him, who looked like a red-haired beauty, was actually a red dragon. To his dismay, Duque found himself stretched out on the bed. Then, the queen merely leaned over his chest and licked him a few times, and he actually returned to his 17-year-old appearance, a handsome young man with short black hair. At this moment, the atmosphere suddenly became a little strange. This was because the queen's hands were like iron pincers that gripped Duque's wrists. Well, in terms of strength, Duque was completely outclassed. The queen hiccuped. "Now it seems that you're quite handsome too." Not knowing what the queen was up to, Duque feigned civility. Yes, although my classmates don't admit it, my mother always says that I'm handsome." "I'm sleepy." The queen yawned. For some reason, this action of hers was very feminine. "Well, there's a strange feeling." Chapter 537. Huh? Duque's head was full of question marks. Was this the rhythm of welfare? He felt that something was wrong. The queen's voice became extremely soft, almost moaning. I feel like my body is floating. There seems to be something pushing against my throat. Could it be that because I just lost an admirer, there's an empty space in my heart? Am I like the bad women in human novels, who fall in love with someone else immediately after the death of their lover? Hey! What kind of nonsense novels are you reading? Even in danger, Duque could not help but complain about this kind of trashy female novel that misled people. No, misled someone who might be the most terrifying existence in the world. Alexstrasza raised her head. Her golden eyes were filled with a haze of confusion. The queen seemed to be a little confused. Revelation of the holy light. Duque cursed. Bullsh *t. How could Revelation of the Holy Light have such a vulgar story? Do you believe that I will fight the Archbishop of the Holy Light to the death? Alright, I was just saying. Alonso's couldn't beat you even if he gathered the entire church. Ugh. The queen burped again. She tried hard to remember. Well, I remember there was another cover under that one. I think it was The Unspeakable Story of the Duchess and the Coachman. F***ck. So it's changing the cover? Countless seniors played with it when I was in university. They bought an English-Chinese dictionary or something for the phone. At this moment, Duque wanted to strangle all the female authors in the world of Azeroth. But it was obvious that the queen was delirious and was running on the road of no return. No. I can't take it anymore. The queen's face was flushed. There's a warm current in my body. There was another moan, and Duque's hair stood on end. Wait. Don't tell me that's. Duke's face turned pale as he thought of something terrible. Normally, no man could resist such a situation. But the queen was still saying, Could it be that my qualities as a female are awakening? However, Duque was not an ordinary man. He had the intelligence of an ordinary man. At this moment, Duque was sweating profusely. He had already figured out what the queen's so-called heat flow was. He struggled with all his might, but a few seconds later, he was horrified to find that he was like a frog nailed to the operating table waiting to be dissected. Under the queen's tremendous strength, he really couldn't move. No. Please. Wake up. Alexstrasza. No. Your Majesty the Queen. Only that was out of the question. Don't. Duque's tears flowed out. Could this be my love? Could this be the affection in my heart that is even more passionate than the dragon's breath? Can I tell you how much I love you? The queen's speech was incoherent. Just by looking at her delicate and alluring face, it was absolutely mesmerizing. However, Duke knew what was going to happen next. No. No. Yamit. Let go of me. Duque lost his composure and screamed. No, it's too late. I'm coming out. Duque, stop struggling. Accept my... Ugh, at this moment, Duque thought of the collapse of the mountains and rivers. At this moment, Duque thought of a broken dam. At this moment, Duque struggled to use magic to resist the queen's vomit caused by too much alcohol. However, Duque failed. Low-density elements would definitely be repelled and dispersed by high-density elements. In front of the Red Dragon Queen, Duque's pitiful frost elements were completely repelled. As a result, a large pile of sour and smelly vomit was poured onto Duque's chest. Then, the queen who had done such a shocking and insane evil thing actually fell asleep. He fell asleep. Asleep. Help. It's fine if you're asleep, but don't sleep there. And, don't use dragon breath. Outside the door, the responsible Gavinrad seemed to have heard Duque's panic-filled pleas for help again and finally couldn't help but rush in. In the next second, this unreliable paladin was dumbfounded. What did he see? From his angle, the beautiful Red Dragon Queen's head was resting on Duque's thigh as if she was doing something shameful. The problem was that the queen's butt was still stuck up high. Even though she still had her pants down, it was an eyesore. Sorry. Sorry to disturb you. Gavin Rad immediately pulled his head back, wondering if he would be silenced or something. No, it's not what you think. Help me. Before Duque could finish, he saw the door close in despair. Me. F***ck. Looking at the fire element that seemed to have a mind of its own, following the breath of the sleeping queen and hovering less than 2 centimeters above his dick, the horror on Duque's face froze. Help, someone save me, there's really nothing going on between me and Alexstrasza. The priest of Azeroth had a skill called Prayer of Despair. Duque didn't believe in the holy light, but it seemed that his bad luck was finally over. A familiar silver-haired figure suddenly appeared on the windowsill. For a moment, the beautiful female figure seemed to scold him in disdain. She wanted to turn around and leave, but the sour smell in the wind attracted her attention. Duque? Sasha asked tentatively. Help me. Duque seemed to have found a life-saving straw. He really wanted to cry. Looking at Duque's face, which was uglier than if he had been tortured but had regained its youthfulness, Sasha couldn't help but burst into laughter. After the initial shock, she finally understood the situation. She put her hands on her hips, not sure if she was angry or amused. It looked like a passionate affair, but it was actually Duque being tortured by the most powerful female dragon in the world in a drunken rage. It was a pitiful and helpless matter. All right, I got it. Sasha really didn't have any good ideas to deal with a dragon. She tried to see if she could loosen Alexstrasza's claws, but she realized that even in human form, the strength of a dragon was not just for show. Sasha was also surprised that the queen didn't crush Duque's arms and legs like twigs. Ugh, if you can't loosen her, at least help me wipe that thing off my chest. It stinks. Duque said bitterly. Wait. I have another idea. If she really lowers her spirit and vitality, we can try. What Sasha wanted to do was the druids, pacify. Most of the skills of a ranger leaned towards hunters, but as the king of the forest, the nature-loving ranger also had many druid skills. Pacify made animals less angry, and dispelled the enraged effect. Miraculously, the queen actually loosened her tight grip, and Duque was able to break free. Chapter 538. Cough, cough. I'm saved. Duque struggled to crawl out. Then, he saw Sasha, who was trying to pretend that she didn't mind, but she was pinching her nose and looking at him as if he were a dirty thing. As for the culprit, the red dragon queen, she curled up into a ball like a cat and fell into a deep sleep. F***ck. He couldn't hit her, and there was no point in cursing her. With Sasha watching from the side, Duque could only blame his bad luck. Ugh. Alright, I'll go take a shower now. Alright? At this moment, Duque, who felt that his life had turned gloomy, rolled to the bathroom in resignation. There was no running water in this world. It was good enough to have 2 tubs of clean water in the bathroom. Fortunately, it was still hot. If it were winter, a bucket of ice water would be poured over his head. Just thinking about it would make him want to die. Not having a shower head wasn't a problem for Duque. Duque was quite good at controlling the water element. Now that he was far away from the drunkard who was covered in flames, the operation of the magic circuit became normal. Sitting in the bathtub, Duque agilely manipulated a column of water to rise from the bucket and poured it evenly on his body. On the other side, Sasha looked at Alexstrasza, who was sleeping soundly on Duque's bed. She didn't like it at all. She couldn't care less. She opened Duke's door and saw Gavin Rad and Vanessa staring at her with their mouths wide open. Gavin Rad's mouth was wide open. This isn't right. Wasn't Boss fighting with the Red Dragon Queen just now? Why is it Aurelia's sister now? Boss is so mighty. Humph. Sasha snorted coldly, scaring Gavin Rad, who was obviously thinking the wrong thing. Her Majesty Alexstrasza is drunk inside and has fallen asleep. Please help carry Her Majesty to the guest room. The 2 guys outside had the word embarrassed written all over their faces, but who asked one of them to be a bodyguard and the other a maid? After a while, the queen was carried away and the bed was changed into clean sheets. When Sasha returned to Duque's room, she was surprised to find that the room still had a rancid smell. After using the power of the wind to disperse it, there was still a little smell. Sasha realized that the smell came from the bathroom. Duque was still washing. There was no shampoo or soap in the world of Azeroth. There was only the simplest form of washing. But that smell. Recalling Sasha's pretentious but disgusted expression, Duque just wanted to scream for help. Suddenly, Duque, whose back was facing the bathroom door, heard the sound of the door opening. The next second, a few soft fingers gently wiped the back of Duque's ears. There's still something dirty here. The one who spoke was naturally Sasha. Duque couldn't stay calm anymore. Although Duque knew that Sasha was a wife-like character in history, he had never thought that Sasha would actually come to help him bathe. Duque's body immediately stiffened. He could only let Sasha do whatever she wanted. Don't think that I want to help you bathe. You're a big shot now. I don't want to walk out and see the great hero of the Alliance being despised by others because of the rancid smell on him. That was a reason too. Alright, when a girl didn't want to do things for a guy, perhaps she could find 10,000 reasons. Of course, when she wanted to do it, she only needed one reason: she was willing. Duque felt as if he had been hit by Nosdormu's time magic. His thoughts became sluggish. Sasha didn't say much. She just squatted outside the bathtub and carefully wiped Duque's upper and back half of his body that had the rancid smell. This scene wasn't erotic at all. Instead, there was a hint of ambiguity. Something felt wrong. Isn't this what lovers do when they're already at home? Duque's brain felt like it was filled with paste. Here, turn around. Duque turned around in a daze. Sasha's face was red. She was so embarrassed that she couldn't hold it in anymore, but she focused all her attention elsewhere. Actually, we still have to thank Her Majesty. She was actually able to help you recover from such a serious life-draining curse. Look at your arm. It was all dried skin before. After Duque was cursed, Sasha counted and examined all the changes in his body as if she was counting her family's treasures. There were many places that even Duque didn't notice, but Sasha did. If Illyria was the epitome of a heroine, Sasha, who was equally famous, was more like a gentle wife. It was already very fortunate to have such a famous heroine. Who would have thought that he'd even offend Sasha? Just then, Sasha revealed a very satisfied smile. Alright, the examination is complete. All the filth is gone. Your body has also recovered perfectly. There was a saying that went, a glance back and a smile can charm 100 people. This time, Sasha gave Duque a pure and beautiful smile. It was like an electric shock that struck the softest part of Duque's heart. The most beautiful thing about a smile wasn't its appearance, but the beauty that came from the heart. Even an idiot could feel that Sasha was worried for his body, and was glad that his body had recovered. This kind of prayer that came from the purest of emotions immediately broke through the last barrier in Duque's heart. Sasha. At first, Sasha thought that she would get a thank you from him. Unexpectedly, Duque caressed her face gently, and then leaned his upper body forward to bring his face closer. Sasha's body trembled, and then she slowly closed her eyes, waiting for the kiss with the most blissful expression. That's right. This wasn't the first time they kissed. But thinking back, she had always been forceful. Duque didn't reject her, or perhaps he didn't have the time to reject her. This was the first time Duque took the initiative to kiss her. The meaning behind this was a huge leap in their relationship in various senses. Duque's lips were a little clumsy, but Sasha didn't dislike this feeling. From a light touch to a passionate response and entanglement. The temperature in the bathroom seemed to be rising. After a long time, the two separated. They were both panting heavily. Some things seemed to be just a step away. Water droplets slid down Sasha's exquisite collarbone. This scene looked so sexy. Clearly, Sasha was also mentally prepared. Duque was clearly looking at his sister, but the Windrunner sisters' beautiful faces reminded Duque of Aurelia. Sorry, let's stop here for today. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. At the very least, I hope to communicate with Aurelia first. At this moment, a familiar voice suddenly came from outside the window. At least you have some humanity, Duque. Otherwise, I won't save you if my sister next to me gets mad. This was Savannah's voice. Chapter 539. Duque and Sasha's neck stiffened. In the next moment, their reactions were very different. Duque was at a loss. Before he had transmigrated, he had been an engineering university student. In that place where sows competed with Jiao Chan, and there was no other place for men to release their male hormones unless they were engaged in homosexual activities, having a female friend was enough to be envied and hated by those roommates who joined the couple's dying group. The only thing that was lacking was to set them on fire. Perhaps Duque had great wisdom, or perhaps Duque was already a hero of the alliance. However, these things were useless to Duque. Because he saw Aurelia's appearance. She was covered in dust, and there were abrasions on her neck, shoulders, ribs, and waist. Some were still bandaged, while others had clearly healed recently. From those shocking wounds, one could imagine how terrifying the battle between Aurelia and Savannah's against Gromhellscream must have been. Those wounds were all near her vitals. Just how many times had she brushed shoulders with death? Just how many times had she barely escaped death, only to fall into despair again? Seeing Aurelia's heavy breathing, and seeing some of the bandaged wounds on her body start to bleed again due to her intense movements, Duque immediately thought about how Aurelia had received news that he was in danger after losing contact for many days. Then, she had madly rushed back day and night. Just what kind of love was that? At this moment, Duque's mind was blank. Aurelia looked at Duque, deep in conflict. Duque's guess was right. She had endured her injuries and rushed back with all her might. Each piece of information regarding Duque made her feel more despair than the last. Duque had been ambushed by the number 1 Beastman warlock, Ghoul Vdan, and the curse of death had reactivated on him. He was getting weaker by the day, and his life force was rapidly depleting. In order to save the Alliance from an absolute disadvantage, and also to redeem herself, Duque brought her third sister, Sasha, and a few others to form an assault team and infiltrate deep into the enemy's rear. There were countless flying dragons patrolling the skies, and nearly 200,000 orcs on the ground. Under such circumstances, they were ready to break into the Horde's heavily guarded grim battle fortress. How dangerous was that? What despair! Aurelia blamed herself. Why did he refuse to bring a mage with him for the sake of convenience? Why was it that when Duque needed her the most, she was wasting so much time on an unimportant tribal chief? If Duque died this time, Aurelia would never forgive herself. However, on the way, he received a piece of news: Duque was safe. Not only was he safe, but he had also become the Alliance's hero. He had actually led a team of 3 to successfully save the Red Dragon Queen. Things should have calmed down, but when she saw Duque's white hair, his aged face, and wrinkled arms in the magic mirror, Aurelia's heart broke again. She sobbed and rushed 100 kilometers through the night to Lordaeron City, then used the portal to rush over. And the result? What she saw was the scene of a youthful Duque kissing his most beloved sister. If it was another woman, the emotions that she had been suppressing for a long time might turn into a towering rage. She might even lose her composure and go on a crazy rampage. But this was her sister, Sasha. Was she happy? Disappointed? Angry? Regretful? Was it self-pity? Or should she give them her blessings? There were too many thoughts in Aurelia's mind. She could not describe the taste in her mouth, as if all the seasonings had been poured in. For a moment, Aurelia had the urge to leave. But when she saw her sister's face that was extremely similar to hers, she felt as if she was the one playing with Duque in the bathroom. The contradictory feeling made her stand on the tree trunk at the same height as the bathroom. She was nailed there, unmoving. Sasha had already thought of a line, which was, "Even if it's my eldest sister, I won't back down." But when the words were on the tip of her tongue, she could not say them when she saw her eldest sister. A gust of cold wind blew, and she suddenly felt very, very cold. Cervantes, who was stuck in the middle of this melodramatic love triangle, was also having a headache. On one side was her most respected eldest sister, and on the other was her most beloved third sister. Stuck in the middle, she would die no matter which side she helped. Queen Sylvanus, who had always been wise and decisive in history, had a splitting headache. Suddenly, as if she had lost control of her emotions, the branch under Aurelia's feet broke. After a crack, Aurelia's body fell. Without any hesitation, Aurelia turned around and wanted to leave at high speed. At this moment, Cervantes' eyes were finally filled with murderous intent. Her eyes clearly told Duque, "No matter which one of us is sad, I'm going to kill you." Duque shuddered. Finally a man. "Don't go. Otherwise, some of us will regret it for the rest of our lives." A thunderous roar spread throughout the entire state guest house. Be it Sasha, Aurelia, or even the onlookers in the state guest house, everyone trembled and froze on the spot. Duke suddenly stood up and activated the Phoenix Flame magic circuit in his body at the same time. The high temperature instantly evaporated the water on his body, but his perfect control did not let any of the steam affect Sasha next to him. He raised his hand, and 10 hands of magic appeared. In less than a second, he dressed himself neatly. In the next second, he grabbed Sasha's waist and opened the window in the bathroom that was more than 2 meters tall. He crawled out and floated to Aurelia with slow fall. Duque let go of Sasha, who was still a little confused, and said to Aurelia, "Let's go for a walk." It wasn't a request or a plea. The firmness in his words made Aurelia feel that what Duque was about to say was the truth. Before Aurelia, who was already unsettled and about to have a breakdown, realized what was going on, Duque grabbed her hand and pulled her away like a puppet. The Dalijan State Guesthouse was very large. Although mages didn't care about aesthetics, the state guesthouse was used to entertain national guests. Naturally, it couldn't be too shabby. In a quiet corner, Duque sat on a stone bench with a back. Then, Sasha sat down on Duque's left side obediently, and Aurelia sat on Duque's right side after half a second of hesitation. Duque took a deep breath and stroked Aurelia's golden hair. "Aurelia, you've worked hard recently. Can you tell me what you've been through recently?" Chapter 540. In that instant, the emotional defense that Aurelia had built up with so much difficulty collapsed. That dignified and elegant female ranger general who was the epitome of elves at almost all times suddenly cried like a child. Boo-hoo. Aurelia threw herself onto Duque's shoulder and grabbed onto Duque's shirt tightly. Her tears flowed down like a river, quickly dyeing Duque's blue mage robe from light blue to dark blue. In the end, it turned into Duque patting Aurelia's back lightly, and then Sasha pressing her hands on the back of her sister's hands. It was a very strange scene. The older Aurelia seemed more fragile, and the younger Sasha became the one who comforted her. After crying for a while, the crying and tears finally stopped. Aurelia used her lark-like voice to talk about what had happened in the past few days. Then, Sasha told her sister about the dangers of diving into the wetlands. It was very interesting. Both sisters had the same reaction. When Aurelia talked about how her neck was almost split in half by Grom's blood howl, Sasha's hands trembled. On the other hand, when Sasha said that she was about to die under the young dragon's breath, but was saved by Duque's ice barrier, Aurelia also shuddered. After the two sisters finished talking about their experiences, the air suddenly fell into a dead silence. At this moment, Duque actually wanted to say something, but realized that he didn't know what to say. But at this moment, the temperature of the air that had already begun to cool suddenly plummeted. Wait. Shouldn't the two sisters be reconciling? What's wrong now? Duque was shocked to discover that an unknown battle aura that didn't belong to science or magic was compressing the air. The two sisters stood on the left and right, and Duque, who was sandwiched in the middle, felt that his body was suffocating from the mysterious power surging out of the two sisters. Duque cursed inwardly. Weren't the two sisters supposed to calm down and talk nicely? What was this terrifying feeling of stagnation? Aurelia elegantly took out a small handkerchief and wiped away the tears on her face. Since she didn't put on any makeup, she didn't have to worry about ruining her makeup like an internet celebrity on Earth. She smiled and regained her valiant and heroic posture. Aurelia gently flipped the blonde hair hanging down from her temples and proudly raised her extremely lethal high-jewel peaks. "All right, sister. I acknowledge that you have the qualifications to snatch my man. However, I will use my strength to make you give up. The relationship I've had with Duque for many years isn't something you can surpass just by spending 2 weeks with him." Duque almost bit off his tongue and swallowed it back into his stomach. "Damn it, after saying so much, you just think that my sister is qualified to fight with you? However, was it a good idea to use such a big move? This was a time kill." On the other side, Sasha didn't back down. She lightly flipped her silver hair and stretched her perfect long legs. "I won't give up. Sometimes, even an instant is enough to surpass tens of thousands of years of mediocrity, let alone 2 weeks. I believe in my choice, and I also believe in my own charm." Alright, resplendent instant is greater than eternity, is out." Before Duque finished complaining in his heart, the two sisters saw that the other party wasn't moved and suddenly changed their target at the same time. "Duque." The two sisters looked at Duque and said in unison, "Duque, who do you choose?" "Choose who?" This situation had already surpassed jealousy and the fight between sisters. This was more like a kind of recognition of their confidence and beauty. But what kind of joke was this? Both of them were famous heroines in the future. Both of them were such amazing beauties. God actually made me have to choose one of them. And there was no way to avoid it. I had to make a choice now, immediately. What kind of harem is this? This was clearly the most tragic charaba between sisters. No retreat. No compromise. I have to choose. A terrifying feeling of being roasted by two great demons, one big and one small, arose spontaneously. What should I do? What should I do? What to do? The cry in his heart was destined to not receive a response. As the focus of the two sisters' gazes, Duque only felt that every second was like a year. That's right, every second was the torture of reincarnation level by level in the 18 levels of hell. But in the next second, Duque felt a wave of grievance. As a pure man, why do I have to choose between other people's choices? Nonsense. When did I become the kind of man who was led around by a woman? Suddenly, Duque stood up, his right hand seemingly waving casually in his mage robe. He looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle and then turned his head, revealing an expression that was clearly smiling but actually crying. His eyes quickly condensed with moisture, and 2 seconds later, a turbid tear slid down his cheek. Under the moonlight, the tear could clearly be seen that the entire face was divided into 2 halves. Duque's voice was full of solemnity. "I am an only child, I have no brothers or sisters. But I believe that it must be a very beautiful thing to have a sister who has accompanied me for 1,000 years. To make such a close pair of sisters have to decide the winner and the loser for a man, such a cruel thing. I can't do it. Duque." Aurelia was a little panicked. "Wait." Sasha panicked even more. "Instead of forcing the two of you to decide the winner and the loser, I will make the decision. The 3 of us will all be the losers." After saying these words in the deepest voice, Duque raised his feet and was about to leave. In the blink of an eye, a sharp sword suddenly cut through the night sky and was nailed less than 5 millimeters in front of the tip of Duque's foot. The powerful force attached to the sword was still trembling after it shot through the garden tiles. Cervanez's angry voice suddenly came. "I said, if you hurt any of them, I will kill you." A cold smile appeared on Duke's face. If you kill me, that's fine. The alliance has won anyway, and I have nothing to worry about. Then, under the shocked gazes of the three Windrunner sisters, Duke continued to stride forward. Stop! Another arrow was shot at Duke's foot. This time, Queen Sylvanas' voice was fierce. This is the last warning. But Duke still didn't stop. He sighed softly. If my death can solve the problem, then let me die. No, wait, Sina. Aurelia was also anxious. She hurriedly stood up. Second sister, no. Aurelia even pounced on her. At this moment, Sylvanas shot out her strongest arrow. The arrow contained the power of thunder. Almost as soon as it was shot, it exploded in the garden. The sharp sword shot at Duke with the anger and determination of Queen Sylvanas. Chapter 541. The three sisters did not expect that Duke would not dodge or use magic. He would actually use his own flesh and blood to meet the arrow head-on. A look of relief appeared on his face, which wasn't particularly handsome but could be considered delicate. That's right. Relief. To the two sisters, the 17-year-old Duke shouldn't have such an expression. His homeland was destroyed by the orcs, but he didn't give up. His capital was occupied by the orcs, but he didn't give up. The alliance was at its worst. More than 3 kingdoms' capitals were destroyed. Even Rotterdam, the leader of the alliance, was almost destroyed, but he didn't give up. He didn't give up even when he was faced with the extraordinary Red Dragon army, or when he was cursed with the cruelest life-draining curse. But at this moment, Duque chose to give up for the first time in his life due to the difficulties of his feelings. And what he gave up was his life. Duque's choice shocked them. It was a shock that reached the depths of their souls. Idiot. Flash. Queen Sylvia's angry face finally showed a look of surprise. Duque, don't be silly. Aurelia exclaimed. She thought of Duque's magical mirror image spell. No. As she screamed, Sasha thought of the magical scene of Duque activating ice barrier at the last moment. So, both Aurelia and Sasha hesitated for a moment. But, under the sisters' exaggerated dynamic vision, Sylvanas' arrow pierced Duque's chest without any resistance. The piercing sound of the arrow tearing through the mage's robe was unbearable to the sisters' sharp elven ears. In the next moment, blood splattered everywhere. The blood splattered at the speed of the arrow, stimulating the sisters' visual nerves to the maximum. Fake? No. This was real. There were no magical waves at all. Duque was really going to die for love. Just because they were forced by the sisters. The greatest hero in the history of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, did not die at the hands of the millions of orcs, did not die under the dragon breath of the controlled Red Dragon Legion, did not die under the pursuit of Deathwing, but because of a relationship? No. Absolutely not. Whether it was out of love or reason, the two sisters had never thought of forcing Duque to this extent. They had never thought that Duque would be in so much pain because of their coercion. In the end, the two sisters attacked at the same time. Boom! A bolt of lightning flashed. Time seemed to freeze. In the garden, the 4 of them froze as if they had been hit by a spell that stopped time. On a tree 10 meters away, Sylvanas maintained his stiff shooting posture. On the ground, Sasha's right hand grabbed the tail of her second sister's arrow. Most of the lightning on it went to her seemingly weak arm, and her fingers were pitch black. In the middle, Aurelia's left hand grabbed the middle of the arrow shaft. The high-speed friction almost scraped off the skin of the Windrunner's fingers, leaving a ghastly trail of blood on the shaft. At the back, Duque puffed out his chest. The sharp arrowhead had already pierced through Duque's chest and ribs. If it had been half an inch more, it would have pierced through his heart and killed Duque. But it was just a little bit more. Duque survived after all. Are you crazy? The two sisters turned and cursed at the same time. Crazy? Maybe. But it's better than having you two fight it out. I'm sorry, I really can't make a choice. It was his left eye just now, and it was his right eye this time. A second tear rolled down from Duque's face. Seeing her eldest sister and third sister's expressions, Cervanus finally realized that she had been the bad guy for nothing this time. This queen, whose name was feared by countless people in the future, could only clench her teeth, stomp her feet, and leave. What was left was only an angry curse. You got off easy, you little brat. The commotion in the garden of the state guest house couldn't be hidden from anyone. Luckily, Gavin Rad was still responsible. He asked Vanessa to chase away the onlookers, and forced himself to be a third wheel to treat Duque and the other two's wounds. Actually, Cervanus had held back. If she had used her full strength, the two sisters wouldn't have been able to heal him so quickly. The state guest house finally quieted down after midnight. On the balcony, Duque and the two sisters kissed goodbye. Aurelia took the lead, and Sasha could only watch her eldest sister angrily. Then, she used the same amount of time without backing down. Not a minute more, not half a second less. It felt like the two sisters had made some sort of agreement that Duque didn't know about. Rest early. You have an alliance meeting tomorrow morning, right? Aurelia said with concern. Yes. You have to miss me. Sasha was even simpler. Yes. After finally chasing away the Windrunner sisters, Duque could finally sleep peacefully. Sleeping on the soft bed, Duque let out a long sigh and thought to himself, luckily, I'm quick-witted, risking my life and losing my moral integrity to revive. I don't even want to lose one. That's right, it was all a ploy. Who asked Duque to revive? Anyway, he would find a chance to get his moral integrity back in the future. If he really hurt anyone's heart and caused them to walk down the path of sorrow, Duque would never be able to forgive himself. Duque quickly fell asleep, in less than 5 minutes. In a daze, Duque was ambushed. Duque opened his eyes, and his vision was filled with that head of shiny golden hair that seemed to glow even in the middle of the night. Aurelia? Damn it. She actually dared to sneak away at this time? Didn't the two sisters make some sort of agreement not to sneak away or something? Duque had just pretended to be benevolent and said that he couldn't choose between the two, and now he was with Aurelia. Wasn't that just slapping his own mouth? Duque wanted to reject immediately, but who knew that Aurelia would seal Duque's lips with a tender finger? Perhaps Duque could find 10,000 reasons to refuse, but who knew that one sentence from Aurelia would settle Duque? What she said was, I miss you. I miss you and I love you were both extremely simple words. Any writer could create countless attributives and adjectives for this sentence, but in the end, none of them could be as straightforward and powerful as this simple sentence. This sentence easily triggered the heavenly thunder and earthly fire. The feelings that Duque had also suppressed for a long time poured out in an instant. System notification, you have used, lacerating strike, on Aurelia's armor. You have used, suppression. You have used, Duque's godly sword 999 combo. Boss Aurelia has been defeated, and has entered, paralyzed, state. Finally, he won. At this time, a pair of arms suddenly wrapped around Duque's neck from behind, and in the corner of Duque's eyes, he saw a similar shining silver light. Chapter 542. There were no other high elves who could bring out the beauty of silver hair to such an extreme. The only one who could appear here without anyone noticing was Sasha. Ah! Aurelia, who had been so passionate that she showed off all her beauty in front of Duque, was suddenly as shy as an ostrich. She actually covered her face tightly. Duque was dumbfounded. What the hell was this? Although I've eavesdropped, I still can't imagine that my elegant, beautiful, and wise big sister is like this after seeing it with my own eyes. Sasha's calm and slightly teasing tone made Aurelia feel as if her entire body was on fire. In the next moment, Sasha hugged Duque from behind. The rich and bouncy feeling made Duque shudder. Duque couldn't help but wave his sword that was still in its sheath. Aurelia almost died from Duque's trap. She let out a coquettish grumble that even she herself couldn't believe. Through the gaps between her fingers, Aurelia, who still covered most of her face, glared at Duque, and Sasha, who was behind him. Calamancida, in the High Elves' language, it probably meant, "Wretched girl, are you trying to show off?" Sasha chuckled. "No, I'm just like you, big sister. I'm infatuated with a little boy named Duque." Then, like a slippery loach, she crawled over from behind Duque and lay down next to Aurelia. She then said something in the High Elves' language to Duque shyly. It was a prayer that combined poetry and music. Paired with Sasha's clear voice, it was rather moving and pleasant to the ear. Of course, after removing the meaningless syllables that were purely for the sake of the tone and tune, it was simplified like a cow chewing on a peony. The most appropriate translation was, "I'm not talented. Please take care of me in the future." Yep, standard newlywed wife dialogue. Aurelia patted Duque, and Duque immediately understood. Duque immediately unsheathed his godly sword. And so, Duque and Sasha began their sword dance. Following the ever-changing rhythm, Sasha continued to shake her fair and flat abdomen. Her 5 fair and jade-like fingers gently spread out. Her pinky and ring fingers curled into her palm and gently pressed against Duque's chest, as though she was resisting Duque's attack. It was the first time they danced together, and Sasha was obviously a little nervous. She tightened her arms with all her might, and coordinated with the attacks of the godly sword. Her long, snow-white legs swayed continuously in complicated and sexy steps. Just like the European fox trot before Duque's transmigration, the intersecting and swaying movements were sometimes elegant, sometimes sensual and charming, and sometimes cool and mysterious. Her mermaid lines, which had been trained for a long time, displayed an enchanting quality that was similar to a belly dance. Duque couldn't take it all in. She had clearly been defeated by Duque's godly sword. But Sasha's expression was still so confident, so proud, so ambiguous, and so seductive. It was as though she was currently the goddess of beauty, Venus. Everything about her was filled with beauty. In his days, Duque felt as though the high elf in front of him had completely overlapped with a certain national vixen from before his transmigration. As long as there was life, the sword dance would not stop. Then, the atmosphere of the two sisters' intense battle disappeared after Duque almost died to prove his resolve. When the storm-like sword dance ended, there was instead a sense of tranquility. "Damn it, Duque. My third sister and I have really been bewitched by you." Aurelia bit down on Duque's shoulder. Duque bared his teeth. "Hee, a good man or a good woman will always have suitors, right? Doesn't this prove how outstanding Duque is?" Compared to Aurelia's wild and untamed nature, Sasha was as gentle as water. Duque spouted nonsense with a straight face. Yes. I've already used godly hypnotism on you. You won't be able to leave me for the rest of your lives." Tsk, Aurelia was disdainful. Sob. "What about me? Beg Duque to take pity on me?" Sasha wiped her tears. Yes, the tears at the corner of her eyes were real, but they didn't flow out now. "Third sister, don't ruin the show." Aurelia was annoyed. Just as they were fooling around, a white light appeared on the horizon. The sun was about to rise. The next day, Duque was woken up by Vanessa's knocking on the door. Hey. Beastly Duke, the sun is up. You have a very important Alliance Throne meeting in the morning. Vanessa's rude voice penetrated into the room. Duque was confused. He suddenly felt that something was wrong. "Wait. Vanessa, what did you call me just now?" "Duke Marcus." Outside the door, Vanessa's voice was extremely calm. Of course, Gavin Rad couldn't help but snicker, which betrayed the little maid's temper. Duque quickly glanced at the records in the system. He immediately felt like killing the little maid to silence her. "Stupid girl, don't think I didn't hear you change the way you called me." Duque shouted angrily. No, you must be sleepy and heard wrong, Your Grace. The little maid insisted. Humph. I'm in a good mood. I won't argue with you. At this moment, Duque turned his head and suddenly realized that there was no one behind him. The Windrunner sisters, who were still there a few seconds ago, had dressed themselves at lightning speed and disappeared. This was way too awesome. When Duque came out, Gavin, Rad and Vanessa saluted Duque. Vanessa added, Lady Alexstrasza from next door seems to have disappeared before dawn. She left a note behind. Duque picked it up and opened it. It was full of crooked words in the human common language. The first line was, I can't believe it. You actually didn't touch me last night. What the hell is this? The wail of a 10,000-year-old virgin? Alright, congratulations. You've managed to keep your life. Hey, is this a murder trap? Actually, my sleeping posture is very bad. No matter what form I take, once I fall asleep, I will easily flip out. Last time, an ancient dragon rushed in because of an emergency and accidentally slapped me, seriously injuring me. It took me several decades to recover. Seeing this, Duque almost spat out a mouthful of blood. The glorious image represented by the term, Queen, began to collapse in Duque's heart. The last message was, actually, I can use a secret method to go back and see what happened to me in the past. I'm sorry for last night, and thank you for making me feel better. I've told the little ones that the Red Dragon Army's principle is not to intervene in the conflicts of the mortal races, but... What followed was a string of cryptic dragon language. After reading it with the system's translation, Duque suddenly felt like he had found a treasure. Ha ha ha. I've worked so hard for so long, saving you was not in vain, Alexstrasza. Chapter 543. Duque used a disguise called makeup, but unfortunately, the disguise technology in this era was too poor. In the end, he still went to the meeting with big panda eyes. The group of kings were all laughing. The current Dalajan was not the same as the floating city in the future. The Dalajan city was located on the southern shore of Lake Lordimir, and there was still a lot of space. However, even though every state guesthouse was a standalone villa, for safety reasons, they were all in the same district. Last night, Duque's side was so noisy that a certain Windrunner's second son used a thunder arrow. It was impossible not to let others know. Of course, because no one deliberately asked about it, not many people cared about Duque's private affairs. Everyone just thought that Duque's ship had failed. With Duque's current status, it was not a big deal if he failed. No one thought that Duque would have a relationship that crossed races. For example, almost everyone knew about Dai Lin and the female elf mage called Gina Goldsword. So what? In the eyes of the high nobles, lovers were just a matter of taste. As long as the wife wasn't of the same social status, she wouldn't be able to show off in public. Speaking of which, at Duque's level, there were not many women who were good enough for Duque. All the kings looked at Duque with a playful expression, as if they wanted to see which family's princess or Grand Duke's daughter Duque would marry in the end. The Alliance Kings meeting naturally prioritized business. After everyone arrived, they immediately started a tense discussion. Turayan first introduced the situation. The Horde's message delivery is obviously much slower than the Alliance's. After losing the Red Dragon Army's assistance, the Horde lost all means of rapid communication. Even now, the 100,000 Horde entrenched on the east side of the Wall of Thornton still have no signs of retreating. According to our estimates, the Wolf Cavalry messengers from Grim Battle Fortress will only arrive at the front lines of the Wall of Thornton tonight, or even tomorrow morning at the earliest. King Salas Trollbane, who was the most nervous, immediately slammed his fist on the map table. What are we waiting for? We need to launch an all-out attack before these green-skinned creatures escape. We need to wipe them out in the Earthy Highlands. As the newly born ruler of a fallen kingdom, Salas was the most nervous of them all. On the contrary, Lang, whose country had been subjugated for a year, seemed even calmer. Of course, in terms of the desire to restore the country, the two kings were equally matched. However, Salas's proposal did not receive much support from the other rulers or representatives. Everyone could see the decline of the horde, and the recovery of the earthy highlands was a sure thing. The question was how and at what cost. In the alliance, every country had their own political and economic demands. Everyone knew that they had to defeat the horde, or else no one would have a good time. Unfortunately, after fighting for so long, even a rich country like the Rotterdam Kingdom felt the pinch, let alone the weaker countries. Just as Salas' face turned livid, Andoin said, "The price to pay is too high. Should we consider waiting for the horde at the front lines to receive the news of the collapse of the rear, and launch an all-out attack while their morale is down? We can chase after the horde's butts, just like chasing rabbits. That would be much easier." As soon as Andoin's voice fell, a few kings of the alliance immediately agreed. Unfortunately, the bronze-bearded dwarves of Cosmoden did not agree. After confirming that the horde was defeated in the wetlands, Muradin Bronzebeard, who had rushed over on his griffin, grumbled, Hey. Are you sure you can annihilate these hundreds of thousands of orcs in the earthy highlands? Don't chase all the orcs back to Cosmoden after you've had your fun chasing rabbits. Then we bronze-bearded dwarves will be in trouble." Kudrin Wildhammer naturally chimed in, "Yes. The earthy highlands and the wetlands are fine, but once we enter the mountains of Cosmoden, the power of our griffins will be greatly reduced." Andoin stole a glance at Duque, and saw that Duque nodded slightly. He immediately felt confident. "Then we can make some slight changes. With the Dalajan Mage's teleportation spell and the transportation of the Griffin Knights, we can send about 2,000 elites to Torrential Fortress. Then, this group of elites will quickly march east and regain control of the position on the north bank of Sauter Bridge. Then, we can," Andoin smacked his fist against his palm. Everyone knew that this was like catching a turtle in a jar. King Soras immediately perked up. Even though he knew that this would be a costly operation, the benefits of this operation were obvious. The horde would completely lose the last organized frontline army. Torrential Fortress can send 400 knights. Stormwind can send 300 knights, King Lang added. Alterac can send 200 knights. The one who spoke was General Haas. Even though the Alterac kingdom only existed in name, this great soldier had been working hard to wash away the shame of the badge on his chest. Kurtiras can send 200 elite soldiers who are familiar with the operation of the ballistae. Daylin also added. Of course, it could be said that the remaining human ballistae in the northern position could be used. However, his positive response still surprised the leaders of the other countries. Since the start of the war, Kurtiras had been acting like he only cared about the navy. The two dwarves looked at each other. The dwarves can send 300 secret room guards. Kuel Salas can send 300 rangers. King Tarinas could not sit still anymore. He gritted his teeth and said, Rotterdam can send 500 knights. This time, it was the 10 countries of the alliance. Every country had sent troops. After some discussion, Lothar, who was the best at fighting, personally led the team. They changed from a simple airborne landing to a ground assault team to directly attack Sauter Bridge. This was because they could still go straight to Torrential Fortress from South Shore along the beach on the east coast. King Salas swore that there was a secret passage in Torrential Fortress that led directly to Sauter Bridge. Hence, the plan eventually became a commando team of 5,000 people to block the escape route of the tribe. Then, Mograine would lead the 200,000 human troops to attack from the front, trapping the tribe from the front and back. Originally, the Alliance's army on the west side of the Wall of Thoradin had always been in a state of combat readiness. Even their rations had been packed long ago, so it did not take long to prepare. On the contrary, the planning of the commando team caused a lot of brain cells to die. The leaders of the various countries had already intentionally or unintentionally ignored Duque, because Duque's contributions were too great. Who knew that Duque had secretly made his presence known? When Andoin and Lang privately asked Duque about the plan, Duque nonchalantly said, "You guys go ahead and fight. If you can't, I'll be the backup." What kind of protection? I'll ask the Red Dragon Army to wash the ground with dragon breath. Pfft. Andoan and Lang both spat. Chapter 544. F***CK. So, all the trouble we went through was just to flirt with a blind man, all for nothing. Andoan and Lang's mouths were so wide open that they could fit an apple. When they sneaked over with the plan, they saw Duque dozing off. In fact, they wanted to comfort Duque. After all, many old politicians who had been in politics for decades could fail miserably before they retired. Duque's influence was too great. Although there was no suppression within the alliance, the kings had already begun to downplay Duque's influence. After all, in the eyes of the kings, it was still unknown whether the alliance would continue to exist after defeating the Horde. When the time came, their own soldiers would all worship the hero of the Horde, and there would be nowhere to cry. When it came to a mission with a higher chance of success, everyone intentionally excluded Duque from the operation. Alright, if you don't bring Duque along, Duque will not care. Everyone knew that the Crimson Dragon Army was a force that broke the rules. It could be said that if the Extraordinary Dragon Army really did help one side, the other side would not even have to fight. It was not that Tarinas had not tried to get in touch with the Crimson Dragon Army, but he could not find a way. It was not that Antonidas did not know Crassus's true identity. When he tried to test him in private, Crassus rejected him harshly. The Crimson Dragon Army has been adhering to the principle of not participating in the wars of other races for tens of thousands of years. Unless there is a crisis that threatens the entire world, the Crimson Dragon Army will not intervene. Since no one mentioned it, they tacitly excluded the Crimson Dragon Army when they were thinking about strategy and tactics. Alright, everyone here thought that the Crimson Dragon Army would not participate in the war, but on the other side, Duque said that he could let the Crimson Dragon Army protect him. At this moment, Andoan and Lang were both dumbfounded. The sleepy Duque, who was still yawning, secretly said, "The Crimson Dragon Army not participating in the wars of the mortal world doesn't mean that the WYRMS are not allowed to seek revenge on their enemies, right?" The two leaders of Stormwind had a very interesting expression on their faces. Damn, wasn't this like letting the magistrates do whatever they wanted but not the people? Was this against the principles? No. The Red Dragon Army really didn't participate in the battle. But our queen has been tortured by the tribe for so long, isn't it okay to seek revenge? Since the boss Alexstrasza had secretly given the order, wouldn't the queen's worshippers rush over to Duque's side to listen to his orders? The list that Duque secretly showed to Lang and Andoan almost blinded them. There were as many as 10 primordial giant dragons on standby at any time, and there were as many as hundreds of thousand-year-old giant dragons. Moreover, they only listened to Duque and Stormwind's orders. Alright, with such a group of inhumane giant dragons holding the line, if the Alliance still couldn't win against a mere 100,000 tribes that had lost their will to fight, then the Alliance should just jump into the endless ocean and drown themselves. Andoan patted Duque's shoulder. Have a good rest for the next few days. I'll see you at the celebration party. Yes. There was no doubt about the outcome of this battle. It had to be said that if Duque hadn't appeared in this life, Anduin Lothar would undoubtedly be the most brilliant military strategist of this era. Within 3 days, Anduin's 5,000 commandos withstood a total of 182 joint attacks from 100,000 orcs in the north and 5,000 orcs in the south. They were firmly nailed to the Sada Bridge. They didn't even give Duque's Red Dragon Army a chance to attack. When Mograine arrived with his army, everything was set in stone. The Dark Portal 2, September 18th. The once fallen earthy highlands were recovered. The Stormguard Kingdom's flag was once again raised on the ruins of the Torrent Fortress. September 25th. The northernmost wetlands of the southern continent were recovered. October 10th. The Iron Furnace Fortress, which had been besieged for more than a year, was finally released. Although they didn't run out of food and ammunition, they were still in dire straits. The orcs once gathered a group of 100,000 orcs and laborers in an attempt to block the Alliance's advance with tight fortifications. This tactic of pillbox warfare, learned from the humans, brought great trouble to the Alliance. More than 20,000 Alliance soldiers were shot to death by the trolls' javelins in front of the pillbox. However, with the Red Dragon Army's seemingly random entrance, all the tribal pillboxes and arrow towers were reduced to rubble like toys. Arrow towers are awesome, aren't they? Giant dragons were sent flying with a single slap. Shooting arrows from the bunker was fun, right? Come, let the Red Dragon flamethrower teach you a lesson. Under the crushing pressure of the completely asymmetrical forces, the tribe quickly collapsed. October 16. Under the cover of Kurtiras and the Stormwind fleet, the 150,000 soldiers of the two countries landed on Stormwind City and the north coast of the Western Wilderness. When the Alliance opened up the second battlefield, it officially announced the start of the Stormwind War. Originally, King Delin thought that this would be a very difficult landing battle. He even personally landed at Stormport with Lang. He deployed 10,000 Marines from Kurtiras, who were best at landing battles, but they didn't meet with much resistance. Stormwind City was garrisoned by a second-rate clan with only 30,000 people. They had less than 20,000 soldiers who could fight. After paying close to 10,000 casualties in the street battles, Stormwind City was reclaimed. However, the next problem was logistics. Looking at Stormwind City, which had experienced a second war and had been reduced to rubble, Delin frowned deeply. When he asked Lang about the food, Lang smiled. "Sorry, my good friend, to keep it a secret from you until now. In fact, in the past year, a lot of the food in Hillsbrad has been provided by the Western Wilderness. We have already arranged a guerrilla force of close to 10,000 people. While they attack the orcs, they also ensure the food supply this time. It can be said that even if no food is sent over, we can still survive this winter." Delin was tongue-tied. With sufficient logistical supplies, the Stormwind Army advanced at lightning speed. On the 30th of October, except for the Reedridge Mountains, the entire Stormwind Army had been reclaimed. Unfortunately, the Horde had deployed a few second-rate clans from the Dark Portal, and they were engaged in a tug-of-war with the Stormwind Army in the mountains. At this time, the Alliance's northern route included the newly joined Gnome Kingdom, Gnomerigan. There were a total of 300,000 soldiers from 9 kingdoms, and they pushed the front line to the burning steppes in the future. At the Blackrock Spire, Orgrim gathered the last of the Horde's forces. 150,000 soldiers and 100,000 orc laborers. Both sides knew that the Blackrock Spire would be the final battleground. On the 1st of November, the Horde sent a messenger and issued a request for a decisive battle. 5 days later, under the Blackrock Spire, let us decide the fate of the Horde and the Alliance. Chapter 545. The west wind was chilly, and the autumn wind made everything on the burning steppe seem even drier. The dry and barren land emitted an endless amount of heat. The source of the heat was naturally the active volcanoes on the steppes, including the Blackrock Mountain in the northwest of the burning steppes. These volcanoes continuously spewed lava, and the scorching lava changed the landscape of the steppes almost every second. Great Chief Orgrim sat on the eastern platform of the Blackrock Spire on the Blackrock Mountain. He looked at the scenery in the distance blankly. Although it was called the Blackrock Spire, it wasn't obvious from the outside. This was because the entire spire was embedded in the towering Blackrock Mountain. Dozens of streams of hot lava flowed down from the lava vents on the mountain, creating many vertical lines that divided the gray-black Blackrock Mountain into many parts. The so-called Blackrock Spire was actually more appropriate to call it the Blackrock Fortress. Orgrim didn't know that the platform he was sitting on would become the burial ground of the Black Dragon Prince, Nefarian. He just stared blankly at the scenery outside the platform. To the north was the scorching canyon, which was also emitting a high temperature. The dark iron dwarves who had recently reached an agreement with the Horde were working in crude furnaces in the canyon, forging weapons for the Horde day and night. To the south was the burning steppes. More than 150,000 orc warriors were camping on the slightly flat ground at the foot of the Blackrock Mountain. These orcs who had just crossed the Dark Portal and arrived in the world of Azeroth didn't know the terror of the Alliance and the Red Dragon Army. They were waiting for the arrival of the Battle of Glory. The 100,000 orc laborers were also excited to be given high-quality weapons. They felt that this was a chance to change their status. At this time, the chief of the Dragon Maw clan, Zulud, arrived. He looked at Orgrim, who was sitting on the edge of the platform, and said rudely, "Great chief, the new warriors of the Horde hope that you can go and say a few words." "Say a few words? I'll go. But not now." Orgrim didn't even turn his head. "Why? Do you know that our people are impatient? After all, they all drank that stuff." "Yeah. Perhaps we should thank the Devil's Blood for making the beastmen violent and belligerent, and we don't have to worry about their morale being low." Orgrim did not bother to hide his sarcasm. "Yes, it is because of the demon's blood that we beastmen still have absolute confidence in our victory. We can even tolerate a bastard like me sitting on the seat of the great chieftain, instead of a brave warrior using Makra to kill me." Zuluhid was silent. Looking out from the Blackrock Tower, most of the orcs below were newcomers to Azeroth. They had never experienced the helplessness of not being able to win despite having the upper hand. They had never experienced the pain and despair of being killed by humans step by step after occupying more than half of the continent. Where were the clans that used to be the strongest in the tribe? The Blackrock clan could almost be declared extinct. After experiencing the burning of the Elven Forest, the burning of Stormwind City, the crossing of the sea, and the Battle of Lordaeron City, as well as the Blacktooth clan, which had split from the Blackhand brothers, the Blackrock clan, which used to be the strongest clan in the past, had nearly 300,000 people and 200,000 warriors. Now, there were less than 5,000 people left in the clan. They could not even compare to a third-rate clan. Under the leadership of the Blackhand brothers, the Blacktooth clan was first tricked by Duque in the Arthi Highlands. Then, after chasing after Gul'dan, they killed a few thousand people from the Storm Predator clan, and then disappeared. Everyone knew that the Blackhand brothers did it on purpose. More than half of the Warsong clan had collapsed. The remaining clansmen, under the leadership of Grom, hid in the deep mountains of the Tirisful woodlands. The Bloodring clan had also collapsed. They had basically lost to Dan Maluo's Iron Furnace Castle. Most of them had died in the siege battle. Recently, they had carried out the Great Chieftain's fortress strategy and wiped out the Red Dragon army. There were less than 10,000 clansmen left under Kilrog Deadeye. The Frostwolf clan had been exiled by Gul'dan to the Alterac Mountains in the northern continent before the war. After Duroden was killed, the Frostwolf clan had completely cut off contact with the Horde. Under the Red Dragon army's betrayal, the Dragon Maw clan suffered the most tragic massacre. There were less than 1,000 people left under Zuluhid. The Fireblade clan had always been a clan with few people. After Darl Triple Bloodblade and Samuro died in battle, the Sword Saint team also suffered heavy losses. There were less than 10 Sword Saints left in the Horde. The former Storm Predator clan and the Twilight Hammer clan, which were dominated by ogres, did not even need to be mentioned. Who knew where those bastards had run off to? The Black Scar clan. After Kashtrak died in battle at Grimbader Fortress and most of his clansmen were killed by the enraged Red Dragon, it was rumored that Kashtrak's trusted aide took the next chief, the young Nazgul, and crossed the Arthi Highlands to seek refuge with the Frostwolf clan before the Alliance launched a counterattack. The Shattered Palm clan was still alright. Kargath Bladefist, the battle maniac, had even asked the Great Chieftain for a battle yesterday. However, any beastman with a bit of brain knew that the Horde was going to lose. Orgrim had no intention of making things difficult for his deputy. He let out a long sigh. "I am thinking about the meaning of this war that we are about to lose." "Meaning?" "Yes." Orgrim raised his head and looked towards the northern sky. The first year of the Dark Portal that the humans spoke of was the most magnificent and glorious year for the entire Horde. The Horde's territory expanded crazily towards the entire north. The territory that they had opened up was almost equivalent to the entire territory known to our world. This was also the year when the entire Horde's fighting spirit was at its strongest, and the chief's ambition was the most inflated. Thanks to the veterans who had experienced the war with the Draenei, it was these elites that easily crushed the resistance of the Stormwind tribe. However, just like all dreams had a beginning and an end, the Horde's arrogant dream of conquering the entire world of Azeroth within 3 years reached its peak in this year. However, in the second year, they crashed into the cold and cruel wall of reality. It seemed like a coincidence, but in reality, it was inevitable that they would fall apart. Orgrim let out a deep sigh. In retrospect, even without Duke Marcus, we would have definitely failed. Why? Zuluhid did not understand. Orgrim's rugged face was filled with regret. We were too arrogant. In the beginning, we massacred almost all the intelligent races that could be seen in this world. We pushed almost all of the intelligent races to the opposite side of the Horde. If I could go back in time, and if I could control the Horde earlier, I would have used gentler methods. For example, I would have first occupied all the areas in the wilderness where there were no intelligent races living. Then, would have eliminated those weak races to create more living space for the Horde. Finally, when we have obtained an absolute advantage, we would then destroy any alliances that might appear. Chapter 546. Zulud gritted his teeth. No one can go back to the past. Orgrim spread out his hands. But I can leave my experience and insights to the next chief, the one who can truly lead the tribe out of the world we are destined to destroy, the one who can truly bring the tribe to prosperity. Zulud narrowed his eyes. Are you going to commit suicide like a coward? Or are you going to give up on leading us? Neither. I want to use my own methods to leave as much vitality as possible for the tribe. Orgrim smiled mysteriously. In this world, no one knew what Orgrim's plan was, except for one person, Duque. For the first time, Anduin Lothar, who was in charge of the army, had a disagreement with Duque. After recovering Stormwind City, Anduin rushed back to the main force of the Alliance in the north. However, when he received many reports from the Elven Forest, he frowned deeply. At this time, the hundreds of thousands of troops had been divided into 2 groups. The main force gathered in the barren land east of the Scorching Canyon, ready to advance head-on. The other group, which consisted of only 50,000 dwarves, gathered in the area of Loch Moden, where the Iron Furnace Fort was located. They were ready to go through the huge tunnel that the dwarves had built for many years and directly pass through the belly of the mountain. At the critical juncture of launching an all-out attack, Anduin, who was in the camp of the Baron Lord, thought for a long time, and chose to summon Duque directly using magic. Duque arrived as promised. Why? Duque, are you worried about me controlling the army in the direction of Stormwind? Duque smiled as he entered the tent, only to find that Anduin was alone. Anduin's face was unusually serious. In Gold's Higher Town, in Blackwell, and near the East Cove sawmill, my men have received reports of you allowing your subordinates to kill orc women and children. Duque's heart skipped a beat. What was going to happen had finally happened, but Duque did not regret it. Is that so? I only request that every warrior visit the settlement that was destroyed by the orcs, and see the remains of the women who were holding their babies after being hacked in half by the orcs with axes. What you're doing is provoking the people's hatred towards the beastmen. I don't care if you're targeting the beastmen warriors, but allowing the beastmen women and children to be slaughtered is not in line with the spirit of a knight. First, please tell me, on what basis should we treat a barbarian race that has massacred the human race kindly? Secondly, if you insist on sparing the women and children of the beastmen, then 10 or 20 years later, when a new batch of beastmen grows up and raises their butcher knives against the humans again, what will you do? Do we have to tell Prince William, oh, Prince William, in the name of chivalry, do not kill orc women and children? That way, it would be more convenient for those little bastards to grow up and slaughter humans again. Duque's words made Anduin speechless. Anduin, we're facing an extremely ferocious and barbaric race. Don't forget that orcs, trolls, and ogres are all part of the Horde. But, if we abandon the virtues that humans should have, then what's the difference between us humans and orcs? Anduin argued. Virtue is destined to be an ideal that cannot be attained by everyone. I don't deny the spirit of a knight, but I'm a very practical mage. I only acknowledge races and civilizations that can be communicated with reason. Andoan, you can remove my position as the Alliance's deputy commander, and even let Lang remove my duke title. But, if you want to stop me from cleaning up the orcs, please bring an army of 200,000. As soon as Duque finished speaking, Andoan fell into a deep dilemma. Andoan was very clear that he could not let the Alliance let go of their hatred. Most of the 11 countries in the Alliance had been tormented by the Horde. More than 1 million humans had died at the hands of the Horde. However, it was not in line with the oath of a knight to allow the Alliance's soldiers to wantonly seek revenge. Faced with Duque's strong opposition, Andoan knew that if he could not convince Duque, it would be impossible to stop the spread of the racial massacre. At this time, as Duque had expected, King Lang came in from outside the tent. Lang spoke very earnestly, "Duque, I don't want to directly refute your approach with reason. I just want to hear your opinion on the Horde." After a few seconds of silence, Duque spoke in a deep voice. "Do you know how many tribes are left on the mainland now? Do you know how many places on the mainland there are for the Horde to thrive if we can't clean up the Horde?" "No. You don't know, but I know." Dao. Andoan and Clayan's expressions immediately turned solemn. The Warsong clan, the Frostwolf clan, and the various troll clans that might join the Horde were all pointed out by Duque on the big map. Kargath, Flaming Peak, Stannard, Gromgal. These tribal strongholds that were almost natural in Duque's game memory naturally had a different meaning in front of Andoan, the military strategist. Looking at these barbarian lands that had been ignored by most people, if left unattended, would become the perfect breeding ground for the rise of the Horde. Andoan and Lang were finally moved. Duque's last reason was the final blow to the balance in Andoan's heart. Think about it, did Thoradin the Great count the women and children of the trolls as weak? In this era, no matter what, humans acted according to Thoradin the Great. Perhaps the spirit of chivalry was very noble, and very admirable, but compared to the common ruler of mankind, Thoradin the Great, it was obvious who was more important. Lothar was indeed a very noble person, and Duque did not want to destroy his faith, but Duque had to do so. Because after the Alliance won, according to history, King Turinas would implement a very F***-Kedup policy to prohibit the Alliance from killing the Horde captives. This was Turinas' evil plan to use the spirit of chivalry to exhaust the other countries of the Alliance. Unless they found an excuse to leave the Alliance, they would be overwhelmed by the ever-increasing cost of the shelter. Those countries that truly had the spirit of chivalry and humanitarianism would become a tiger in their own bosom. King Turinas, who originally wanted to take advantage of the situation, was also defeated when he met the fallen Arthas. Duque finally understood. Of course, he hated the violent old tribe to the core and wanted nothing more than to kill everyone in the tribe. Unfortunately, the orcs were like cockroaches that could not be killed. It was impossible to completely wipe out the Horde in such a big world, so he had to at least reduce the living space of the new Horde, and try his best to keep the new Horde under control. He did not want to have the chance to destroy the Alliance at every turn, or have a stupid chief roar that would affect the city's appearance and cause trouble for the Alliance. That was a long story. More recently, Duque's focus was on the second battle of the Dark Portal. In this battle, according to the original history, the Alliance hero that Duque respected the most, Anduin Lothar, would be killed by Orgrim. Chapter 547. That's right. In the original history, Lothar would die. The cause of his death was his most trusted godly sword. This godly sword wasn't widely recognized in the Alliance as the king's sword that was inherited from Thoradin the Great. Or rather, the king's sword that was announced to the public was just a cover to hide the true identity of the godly sword. About 25,000 years ago, the godly sword, Dark Judge, was split into two pieces after the Titan war god Sardras betrayed it. One was, Tisharaj, in the hands of Agrama the Avenger, and the other was, Garibler, in the hands of Sardras the Destroyer. When Sardras the Destroyer tried his best to get Tisharaj, and merge it into Galslark, to summon the Dark Judge, to destroy the Pantheon, father of the gods Al-Mansur proposed to forge a weapon that could compete with Galslark. However, this would be extremely difficult. The Dark Judge was a combination of good and evil, so what should the newly forged weapon be? Completely bright and completely good. Roaring Thunder Gugnius found the best forging materials in the universe. Forger Kaz Goros began to forge this powerful weapon, a godly sword. Dreamweaver Noganon used almost all of his power to enchant it. Agrama the Avenger injected his noble soul into the sword, and the sword was called Iskani Punisher. Just as the sword was about to be completed, things changed. Sargeras the Destroyer led the Burning Legion to attack the Pantheon, and the gods used all their strength to finally complete this weapon. This newly completed weapon was ejected out of the Pantheon due to the force that erupted during the interruption, and was left in the newly created Azeroth. Although the gods wanted to find this sword, because of the Burning Legion, they had to deal with the enemy in front of them first. After a long time, this matter was gradually forgotten. More than 20,000 years later, 3 travelers found this weapon in an abandoned cave. They were Lang Rin, the Guardian Mediv, and Anduin Lothar. Only the most noble of men could wield this sword. Fortunately, one of the 3 had it, and that was Anduin Lothar. This was the difference from the history that Duque was familiar with. The moment the sword acknowledged Lothar as its master, it suddenly fused with the king's sword that Lothar had inherited from his ancestors. Most of the time, the sword that appeared in front of others was still that seemingly thin but beautifully crafted one-handed sword. However, when Noxus needed to fight or had a thought, the sword would quickly transform in a flash of golden light. It had transformed into a gigantic 2-handed broadsword, and it was imbued with a divine aura. It was as if it would slay any evil. The Guardian Mediv gave this sword a name, Quell Zarum. In Sargeras, it meant the sword of nobility. This sword woke up from its 25,000-year slumber. Later, Anduin Lothar used this sword to kill his way into Karazhan. Fortunately, Duque also obtained the temporary approval of this divine sword. He used this sword to stab Mediv, who was possessed by Sargeras, and sent Sargeras' soul into a bottomless abyss. However, this sword had a fatal weakness. It could not be used against people of noble character. When the wielder used it against a noble person, it would lose its divine power. No one would have thought that the leader of the ferocious orc army, the orc leader who started a bloody massacre on the Azeroth continent, Great Chief Orgrim, was actually a noble person. That's right, although Orgrim had caused countless killings, the starting point of all his actions was for the continuation of his race. In the end, he was judged as a noble person by Quell Zarum, and refused to release his invincible divine power. This happened at the most crucial moment of the battle between Noxus and Orgrim. It could be said that success was noble, and failure was also noble. Because of his noble character, Noxus was able to master Quell Zarum. He led the army to fight in the Silverpine Forest, and it could be said that he was invincible. Other than Grom Hellscream, who had Bloodhowl, no one was a match for him. However, during the duel with Orgrim, Quell Zarum was degraded to ordinary iron. In the end, it was smashed by Orgrim's semi-divine weapon, Hammer of Destruction. This hammer not only smashed the exterior of Quell Zarum, but it also hit Noxus' chest. Noxus died because of this hammer. In life, 9 out of 10 things did not go your way. The longer you lived, the more you would feel that you had missed out on too many things, and left behind too many regrets. After transmigrating, if any of the familiar faces around him died forever, Duque would feel that he could not accept it, let alone Duque's most respected hero, Anduin Lothar. From the time Duque was penniless to the time Duque rose to power, Lang and Duque had given Duque too much support. She had never dragged him down. She would do her best and not hold back. Even if in this life, because of Duque's efforts, Lang did not die, and Duque did not have to lick King Terenas' boots and beg for a chance of survival for William, who had lost his father. And Duque did not have the glorious record of fighting alone at the front line of the Alliance. This did not affect Duque's noble character. Ever since he became the commander of the Alliance, Anduin had never deliberately favored any country's army in any military operation. Those who were capable would be promoted, and those who were incapable would be relegated. Even though Turinas had hinted many times that he hoped the army of the Rotterdam Kingdom would get better missions, and Duke ignored him. It was precisely because of his fairness that he set a good example for the entire alliance. Hence, there was a real atmosphere of equality within the alliance. Hence, no matter from which perspective, Duque had no reason to let Enduk die in the hands of Orgrim. There was a problem. If he wanted to seize the last opportunity to weaken the tribe, he had to seize the opportunity now. Slaughtering the tribe was obviously dishonorable for most of the knights, and it would definitely cause a conflict with Anduin and the others. If his nobility was tarnished, Anduin Lothar would no longer be the same Anduin Lothar. On the other hand, since Duke had chosen to save Anduin's life, Anduin would definitely not allow Duke to assassinate Orgrim when the bastard chose to surrender for the sake of the continuation of the orcs, even if Duke had saved Anduin's life. He would let so many orcs survive by sucking away the finances of the alliance, and then shout the classic, "Orcs will never be slaves," after 10 years. That made Duque very unhappy. What should he do to have the best of both worlds? Duque first used the hatred of the people to attack Anduin and Lang's hearts, and then used the name Thoradin the Great to lower their psychological bottom line. Finally, he used his ultimate move against the orcs. Chapter 548. Family planning was our basic national policy. Anduin was a warrior. Although Lang was well versed in all aspects, he was not very good at internal affairs. Neither of them saw through Duque's insidiousness. No, it was wisdom. At the end of the day, this wasn't the era of Azeroth where technology was everywhere. After seeing the Draenei and absorbing the technology from the Pantheon, all kinds of crazy things appeared in Azeroth. Especially when the Burning Legion entered, and even the Floating Universe fleet came. Now, it was still an era of cold weapons. In the era of cold weapons, to a large extent, people were used. Without underlings, no matter how powerful Thrall was in the future, did you think you could destroy the alliance of 10 million people with 300 red underpants? How was the new tribe formed? In the end, the alliance went too far and left too many orcs. Although they used enslavement and even used some of the orcs as gladiators, they did not control the number of orcs well, and did not notice the rise of the remaining orcs. As a result, the Frost Wolves and Warsong clans that were hiding in the dark rose again, and rescued the orcs that were locked up everywhere. Then, they escaped the alliance's pursuit and turned to the Kalimdor continent across the endless ocean. So, when Duque first scared Lang and Anduin, the soul of the best actor arrived. It can be foreseen that the threat of the tribe will continue to exist for decades, or even hundreds of years. If we do not handle it well, it will bring disaster to the entire Rin family and the descendants of the people of Stormwind. Duque's words made Lang's heart ache. Anduin clenched his fist. Is there no better way? Duque, for the sake of the kindness of humans. Anduin did not mention the holy light because mages did not believe in it. The best actor Duque looked up 45 degrees, and his eyes lost focus as if he had seen the sky outside through the tent. Well, since you insist on the justice and chivalry in your hearts, I will give in a little. Let me think. 5 minutes later, Duque started writing and revising. Then he spent another 10 minutes writing a rough family planning policy. First, in principle, they would not kill any captives. Secondly, an adult female orc was only allowed to give birth to one child. After giving birth, she had to undergo a vasectomy. Third, the husbands of all beastmen mothers must fight for the alliance and clear out any beastmen or trolls who stubbornly resisted. Every year, they must hand over at least one frost wolf or Warsong tribe beastman's head. Otherwise, the female beastmen and their children who were held hostage will be punished differently. 4. Sit together. Any beastmen who dared to escape would be punished according to the clan's rules. If one escaped, 10 would be executed. If 10 escaped, 100 would be executed. If 100 escaped, their entire clan would be executed. After writing, Duque exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. As a transmigrator, he knew very well how powerful Sar would become in the future. He did not remember who had picked up Sal, but he could have used his power to kill Sal. Even if he failed, it would take more time for the tribe to rise again after losing the number of people. Then, it would depend on how much vitality the Alliance could preserve in the third battle of the Dark Portal. After Duque made a compromise, Lang and Andoin heaved a sigh of relief. They saw Duque as the core of the future of Stormwind. Of course, they did not want Duque to have a fundamental conflict with them over such a small matter. Lang looked through it repeatedly and nodded. All right, if that's the case, I think it would be easier for the other countries to accept it. At this time, Duque brought up another matter. Andoin, may I ask if your sword can only attack enemies without noble character? Andoin frowned. He did not know what Duque meant. Yes, that's right. My sword will never be pointed at the kind. If. I said if. What if the chief of the tribe, Orgrim, is a noble person who cares for the whole tribe? What would happen if your king's sword clashed with his hammer of destruction, a demigod weapon? Andoin furrowed his brows tightly. He did not understand why Duke would raise such a hypothesis in such a neurotic manner. When he asked again, Duque just laughed it off. Andoin could only bury the doubts in his heart. After getting rid of that little interlude, Andoin finally focused all his energy on the battle. Originally, if Stormwind could break through the triangular junction in the Reedridge Mountains and cut off the orcs' reinforcements from the Dark Portal to the Blackrock Spire, the battle would undoubtedly be much better. Unfortunately, the tribe had realized it too. When Stormwind reclaimed the Elven Forest and the Twilight Forest, they had started to build tunnels in the Reedridge Mountains. A large number of tunnels that extended in all directions ran through the entire mountain area. In order to prevent the ancient dragons from destroying the entire mountain area, the orcs had even placed a large number of rolling stones in the caves. In case of a fire attack or a flood, the orcs could simply stuff the round boulders in. Unless there was an extremely great pressure, neither the dragon's breath nor the flood would be able to enter the mountain. To pass through the triangular junction? Sure, they could use humans to fight the orcs in the tunnels. Before Duke could gather enough dwarves or gnome warriors, using humans to fight a tunnel battle with the orcs would be a battle of attrition, and it would be a huge loss. In the narrow tunnels, the orc warriors could unleash their maximum combat power. It was a similar situation in the Blackrock Spire. Originally, Duque asked the Red Dragon Legion to help clear a wave of orcs outside. After losing thousands of people, Orgrim waved his hand and almost all the orcs squeezed into the Blackrock Spire. The Blackrock Spire was not built according to the size of a dragon. It used to be the territory of the Dark Iron Dwarves. 230 years ago, during the War of the Three Hammers, the Dark Iron Dwarves were exiled to the Reedridge Mountains after they lost. Later, the king of the Dark Iron Dwarves, Emperor Thorison, and his witch wife led an army to launch a counterattack. They actually divided their army into two groups to attack the Bronzebeard Dwarves of Ironforge and the Wildhammer Dwarves who were still in grim battle at the time. The defeated Dark Iron tribes summoned the Fire Elemental King, Ragnaros, who had been exiled for a long time. Unexpectedly, the whole tribe was enslaved by Ragnaros. The opening of the Elemental Plane Rift caused a major disaster to the entire Azeroth. It also changed the terrain rapidly. The originally larger Reedridge Mountains were separated. Between the Scorching Canyon and the Reedridge Mountains, there was now the Burning Steppes and the huge lava volcano that was tens of kilometers long, the Blackrock Mountain. Chapter 549. Interestingly, the Dark Iron Dwarves enslaved by Ragnaros occupied the Blackrock Abyss at the bottom of the Blackrock Mountain. After the orcs conquered Stormwind City, they started to use the lava cave to build and expand the Blackrock Fortress. After hearing that the Iron Furnace Castle's Bronzebeard Dwarves had joined the alliance, the Dark Iron Dwarves joined the tribe without hesitation. They were happy to cause trouble for the Bronzebeard Dwarves, and even came out to build all kinds of weapons and fortifications for the tribe while Ragnaros was still asleep. Hence, the defense of the Blackrock Fortress was quite strong. More than 200,000 orcs squeezed into a fortress. Orgrim was right about the final battle, but what if the orcs lost and defended the fortress? Would the Alliance's army be stuck in the scorching canyon? Usually, Lothar's head would explode from thinking about it. What's so difficult about it? If they really dare to retreat, we dwarves will show them. Magni Bronzebeard said loudly. Anduin wasn't ignorant about the dwarves. When he was young, he often went to the Iron Furnace Castle, and was old friends with Magni. However, how exactly was he going to see? Not only did Anduin have to be convinced, but he also had to get the approval of the generals of the other countries. At this moment, Duque suddenly said, "Steam siege vehicle?" The eyes of Magni and Jurban Mekatok, who was equivalent to the Gnome King, lit up. They didn't expect there to be someone among the humans who knew about it. And it was one of the big shots in the Alliance, Duque? Hee, you know about it too. Magni laughed. Unexpectedly, Duque frowned. Not good. Why not? Jurban was a little unhappy. After all, the steam siege vehicle was one of the greatest masterpieces of the dwarves and the gnomes. It has to be near the fortifications before it can be activated, Duque said with certainty. It can be easily destroyed by the orcs' crude defensive weapons. Magni asked, for example? For example, a giant rolling log that is 100 feet long and 20 feet thick? Duque's random example made Magni and Jurban's expressions change. That's right, the beast men were animals with immense strength. If that was the case, it would be a little dangerous. Jurban asked, "What good idea do you have? Why don't we modify the steam tank and make it look like this?" Duke waved his hand, and a 3D projection of a tank model that looked a little like a large, box-like dwarf steam tank appeared in front of Magni and Jurban. If there was another transmigrator present, he or she would realize that the tank looked very much like the Su-152 tank destroyer. Of course, with the industrial power of the dwarves in this era, they were forced to abandon the long barrel, but because there was no rotating turret, they could increase the caliber of the main cannon even more crazily. Similarly, in order to defend against attacks from the front, in a situation where the exquisiteness and steel rolling technology were not up to standard, the armor at the front was thicker. After giving up on the rotating turrets, they could add a few more firing holes on the side and install some musketeers to take care of attacks from the side. Both Lothar and Migraine were dumbfounded by the topic that Duke and the dwarf were talking about. Their understanding of the dwarven weapons was very primitive. He always felt that the dwarven tanks could withstand swords and knives, but they were a little weak against heavy weapons such as sledgehammers. For example, on the battlefield, he had seen the orcs smashing the dwarven tanks with tree trunks more than once. But at this time, if they didn't trust the dwarves, they would ask their own soldiers to fight the orcs in the streets. Any commander who cared about his soldiers would not do such a heartless thing. Anduin had been complaining about Duque's suggestion to modify the siege weapons so late. Firstly, the war was imminent, and secondly, there were only 4 days left. Would they make it in time? Magni waved his hand. Don't underestimate the dwarves and gnomes. Such a low-tech modification, we can do it in one night. Magni and Jurban were so confident that even Duque was a little doubtful. Hey! Are the dwarves all so strong? One night? It's a steam tank, right? They don't need to recalculate the weight to solve the tank's power system? What about the wheels? What about the tracks? What about the suspension system? Then, the next day, Duque was pleasantly surprised amidst a wave of applause and praise. Duque came out with sleepy eyes. Duque was dumbfounded too. F***CK. I want you to be a tank destroyer, not a land cruiser. What the hell is this 10-meter-long metal lump that's almost 2 stories tall, 3 carriages wide, and almost 3 stories tall? Not only was Duque dumbfounded, but the Windrunner sisters' mouths were also wide open. All right. At least its appearance was perfect. Duque noticed that apart from the front armor that was really made of steel, the sides were made of wood and covered with 2 to 3 layers of iron. When Duque walked over, he saw a huge wheel made of pig iron that was as tall as a man. Even though the outer part of the wheel was mostly covered by the outer armor, Duque could clearly see, no tracks. No tracks. No tracks. Important things must be repeated 3 times. Then how will the vehicle turn and pass through complicated terrain? And with such a heavy vehicle, what kind of steam transmission system will it use? With this question in mind, Duque turned to the back of the vehicle to take a look and almost bit off his own tongue. High-tech my ass. No wonder they said it was a modification without any technological content. Like hell I'd believe you. Looking through the open back door at the back of the tank, Duque could clearly see at least 100 dwarves chatting and bragging in front of rows of pushers at the bottom of the tank. Right. That's right. It's the pushers used to push the vehicle. It seems like this tank destroyer that weighs at least a few dozen tons is being driven by humans. Of course, as long as everyone listened to the commands, it would be fine. Pfft. Duque choked. Perfect. Just then, Magni and Gerben came over with proud faces. The great dwarf craftsman Gerben laughed. How is it? Even though it's a bit rushed, it can definitely meet the requirements for attacking the city. Magni laughed as well. Hee hee. For this big guy, I've specially contributed the biggest cannon in the entire Dan Maluo Empire. You should know that I usually only use my beloved, small steel cannon to blow up mountains. Pfft. Please forgive Duque for spitting again. He had underestimated the lunacy of dwarves and gnomes. What the hell is a small steel cannon? On Earth, anything over 20 millimeters was called a cannon. During World War II, the Germans had gone crazy with that 800 millimeters Gustav railway gun. The problem was that the dwarves were 100 times crazier. The caliber of this cannon was measured in meters. Magni stepped forward, tiptoed, and patted Duque on the shoulder. I have to thank you for coming up with such a good idea. Without protection, I really wouldn't dare to pull my baby out. Chapter 550. The dwarves' sickness didn't stop there. The cannons of this era didn't have the precision required by the machinery industry. The steel wasn't up to standard, and there were no so-called rifling. So the firing range of this small steel cannon wasn't very far, only about 2 kilometers. Of course, because the cannonball had something added to it, it wasn't a traditional cannon. According to Magni's translation, with one shot, not even a blade of grass would grow within a 100-meter radius. Alright, next question. How do you load the cannonballs? Why don't I see any loading devices? That's right, the 6-meter-long cannon with a diameter of about 1.2 meters was fixed to this man-powered tank destroyer. Looking at those huge cannonballs with a diameter of 1 meter, Duque felt his eyelids twitch. This thing weighed at least 3 or 4 tons, right? What else can we do? Use manpower to carry it. Magni snapped his fingers, and a dwarf's secret chamber guard's body suddenly swelled up like a balloon. It was obvious that the guy's armor was specially made. The moment his body grew bigger, the armor disassembled on its own. A good breastplate turned into something like a breastplate. That pair of leather pants was also specially made. The long pants didn't tear even after being worn into a pair of shorts. Looking at that guy's body glowing with a silver metallic sheen, Duque finally understood. Deity's descent? Yes. Magni smiled. Seems like you understand us dwarves quite well. Deity's descent was another one of the dwarves' sickening racial talents. Dwarves who had awakened this innate skill through rigorous training could achieve a short-term increase in strength, attack power, defense power, and vitality by increasing their size. Fine. Dwarves, let a few dwarves who awaken Deity's descent to carry the cannonballs. You win. Looking at Duque's expression of admiration, Magni and Gerben laughed happily. Magni suddenly came over and said sneakily, "Oh, it sounds like you know how to use a loading device? Can we discuss it privately later?" Duque's eyes darted around. We're at a stalemate at Reedridge Mountain on Stormwind's side. Why don't you send 1,000 secret chamber guards first? Are you kidding me? Currently, the entire Bronzebeard dwarven clan only had 1,200 secret room guards. No. There's no room for negotiation. Magni's tone was resolute, like an old hen protecting its chicks. A faint smile appeared on Duque's face. Almost as soon as they saw Duque's smile, those who were extremely familiar with Duque's personality, such as Aurelia, already covered their mouths and snickered. Duque was going to scam people again. Then, I'll use the secret of large-scale tank assault, Blitzkrieg, in exchange? Blitzkrieg? The name sounded grand. Magni and Gerben pricked up their ears. Over the years, their steam tanks had been ridiculed by outsiders. Useless lump of iron. It was a waste of manpower and resources. He was no match for an orc warrior's 200-pound sledgehammer. With a few strikes of the hammer, the steam tank would fall apart. Not as good as a hammer. No matter how many times Magni and Gerben heard these words, they felt as if needles were stabbing into their hearts. Even though the soul of steampunk was deeply imprinted in their hearts, and they firmly believed that high technology would replace the weak swords, as long as the steam tank didn't prove itself on the battlefield, they and their inventors were destined to be ridiculed by others. Meanwhile, the old-fashioned faction among the dwarves continued to advocate that more energy should be spent on training the most capable dwarven guards in the secret chamber. This made Magni and Gerben very uncomfortable. Now, Duque's words had directly scratched the itch in the depths of their hearts. Duque flipped his hand, and a huge virtual image appeared. It was a huge plane with hundreds of plumes of dust rising from it. If one took a closer look, they would realize that those were actually tanks that were completely different from the dwarven steam tanks. They were charging forward at full speed. They used their high-speed assault ability to swiftly and violently tear apart the enemy's defensive line, circle around the enemy's rear, and annihilate them. Duque's magnetic voice rang out at this moment. Even though I acknowledge that your invention is an epic-making genius invention, it's obvious that your use of tanks is wrong. Tanks have never been a weapon for attacking fortifications or confrontations. Tanks represent firepower and mobility. Mobility is the soul of a tank. Mobility? The two short big shots shuddered. Because the image was too fast, the two couldn't see what kind of enemies the tanks were fighting. But this didn't stop them from opening a new window in their minds. Just as they were about to hear more, Duque was addicted to the suspense and directly closed the image. Wait. Duque didn't care about them. Instead, he continued to tempt them. There are nearly 300,000 human soldiers and thousands of mages gathered in the barren lands. If it's a head-on confrontation, when will it be the dwarves' turn to take the lead? By the time your short legs arrive, the battle will have already been fought to the bitter end. Everyone is advancing with infantry, so why should the dwarves take the lead? Magni's face turned the color of a pig's liver. After being beaten up by the orcs at their doorstep for a year, everyone was filled with anger. Originally, Magni could not stand the people of Rotterdam who regarded themselves as the saviors of the dwarves. Now that Duke mentioned it, Magni immediately felt a little discouraged. Gerben spoke up. Then, Duque, do you have any good ideas to help the dwarves and gnomes vent their anger? Take the lead? Duque smiled mysteriously and led the two into a dwarven tent sneakily before saying, the tribe's chief, Orgrim, has indeed sent a letter of challenge to the Alliance and challenged Lothar to a decisive battle. But Orgrim is very cunning too. He didn't promise to fight to the end. If he can't win, he can't retreat into the Blackstone Fortress. Think about it, if 200,000 orcs retreat into the fortress, how long will it take for the Alliance to take down the Blackstone Fortress? Who will be sent to fight in narrow alleyways like that? Magni couldn't stay calm at all. The dwarves would definitely send the dwarves, who were best at tunnel warfare, as cannon fodder. Even if Lothar was really kind enough to share the losses of the various countries, it would still be a nightmare for the bronze-bearded dwarves who had already suffered heavy casualties. It had to be known that Magni had mustered almost all of the adult dwarves who could fight for the sake of revenge in a fit of pique. If the losses were too great, it could be imagined that the bronze-bearded dwarves wouldn't be able to recover for a long time. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.